Chapter 274. The moment Paul voiced his decision, he clearly felt Lillian's gaze tighten. The sudden sense of oppression made him straighten his back and wait to be reprimanded by his royal sister. However, to his surprise, after a long silence, Lillian did not say anything. The black-haired girl stared at the young man opposite her at this time. In fact, her heart was far from being as calm as she appeared on the surface. As a royal princess, Lillian, who was born in the palace, had never experienced much familial affection since she was a child, and she had never had the experience of getting along with relatives younger than her. In her impression, this was the first time a creature like her younger brother had appeared. She should have taken care of him as an elder, but she did not expect Paul to block this path from the very first step. It was fine not to join the Purple Roses faction. It was a wise choice to do so. Although Lillian could not shelter Paul in the name of the organization, it was not a big deal to occasionally help her younger brother who had no affiliation. With her ability, she could do it. But once Paul joined another faction, the nature of this matter would be different. It was equivalent to Paul taking the initiative to give up Lillian's care and follow an outsider. This matter could cause serious consequences. No matter what, Paul's surname was Ackman. As a member of the royal family, even if he did not have the right to inherit, it was unacceptable for many people in the Austin Empire to submit to an outsider. Not to mention, Luo Ye was a noble of the theocracy. That person should have considered this matter. Even so, why did he still take Paul in? Is this your choice? Royal sister? I mean, did you take the initiative to ask for this?
Yes.
I took the initiative to look for Big Brother Luo Ye yesterday. We haven't seen each other since that incident at the beginning of the semester. I didn't expect him to really agree to take me in. Looking at the touched smile on Paul's face, Lillian frowned slightly. She could not understand Luo Ye's behavior more and more. But the girl hesitated for a moment and did not say anything because she knew that she could not change Paul's decision now. If you've really decided to do this, it means that you're ready. Let's not talk about unaffiliated free people for the time being. Among other people's factions, even my security department can't provide you with any help. If this is a trap, you'll have to fight alone, and you'll definitely arouse the strong disgust of some of the nobles in the country. Father might have some ideas, and your environment might be even worse. The black-haired girl calmly talked about the difficulties that Paul might encounter in the future. Hearing this, Paul's face stiffened for a moment. He recalled what Luo Ye said when she showed him the cyan ring last night. After a moment of silence, he nodded. I believe in Big Brother Luo Ye. Compared to the goodwill of those fake nobles, I want friends who treat me with sincerity. His Majesty may hate me because of this, but I'm just an illegitimate child who doesn't have the right to inherit. I'm not interested in the throne either. Compared to that, I want a beautiful school life and work hard to become stronger to get closer to the goal in my heart. Paul clenched his fists as the image of the black-haired, golden-eyed young man emerged in his mind. Looking at him, Lillian couldn't help but widen her eyes slightly. Is that so? Lillian let out an undetectable sigh. She gazed at the young man and was filled with emotions. She also confirmed the fact that Paul was an anomaly in the cold-blooded Ackman family. Unlike his elder brothers who were passionate about pursuing power and status, even though Paul came from a humble background, he gave Lillian the feeling that he was living seriously. That was a more positive, free-flowing youth, and the pursuit of truth. It was a pure feeling without the smoke of conspiracy and the stench of rotten interests. It was also a way of life that Lillian envied. But it was a pity that Paul didn't choose to get close to Lillian. Otherwise, the girl felt that they might have been able to maintain a good relationship. Since you've made up your mind, I won't keep you any longer. But after all, we're relatives who have origin-substance resonance. If there's any critical situation as a last resort, you can still look for me. Origin-substance resonance? I understand. Thank you for your kindness, royal sister. Although Paul was puzzled by the so-called origin-substance resonance, he still understood what Lillian was trying to say. The young man who received the promise hurriedly thanked her. The black-haired girl glanced at Paul and didn't find it strange. After all, Paul had just reached source rank level 5 not long ago. It hadn't been long since he obtained the origin substance, so it was normal that he didn't understand origin substance resonance. After thanking her, Paul, who had finished explaining everything, felt much more relaxed. After finishing his dessert, he bid farewell and left. Walking out of the exquisite and elegant Linglong Pavilion, the young man was filled with emotions. Although royal sister Lillian doesn't like to talk and doesn't have much of an expression, she seems to be a good person. If only she could have a better relationship with big brother Luoya. Paul sighed at the huge difference between the two of them. At the same time, a question arose in his mind. What exactly is origin substance resonance? There should be a feeling of resonance no matter how you think about it. My origin substance is fine every day. When did it ever resonate? Paul frowned in confusion. After thinking for a while, he realized that he had touched on a blind spot in his knowledge. He could only shake his head helplessly and throw this matter to the back of his mind. Forget it. When I have time, I'll ask big brother Luoya. The young man thought so and left the Black Rose faction's encampment. Luoya had many purposes for entering St. Freya Academy. Learning knowledge, improving himself, making friends, and obtaining academic qualifications. On the surface, he was working hard in every aspect. As for the secret goals, there were even more, such as finding clues about Scholar, the series of events that Paul had caused, and Roy's mission that was basically impossible to complete. Chapter 275. In the entire kingdom of scholars, from old men in their 80s to children as young as 8 years old, everyone knew that the students of St. Freya Academy were either rich or respectable. After graduation, they would have a bright future ahead of them. In Leinster, where hormones were flourishing, the young girls of various academies were even more aware of this fact. But as everyone knew, St. Freya Academy was a closed school. It was known as a city within a city. There were many students, but they could not be found on the streets of Leinster. So what should one do? The easiest way was to go to the state-run Wisdom Library. This treasure trove of wisdom that was open to all humans had very relaxed conditions for Leinster students. Because of this, it became a gathering place for students from other schools. For some playboys, this was a place for romantic encounters, but for Luoya, it was a little noisy. Strolling towards the paid personal reading room, Luoya began to rummage for his St. Freya Academy ID in his pocket. As a student of the school, he did not need to pay for his personal reading room immediately. Instead, he would receive a bill at the end of the semester. But as a ring-bearer, Luoya could use the public funds to pay for his reading room, so he did not even need to keep an account. All he needed to do was show his ID. Luoya queued up to the front desk. After showing his student ID and the ring of green rose, the staff immediately became more enthusiastic. They even pointed out the brightest and brightest rooms for Luoya. The black-haired boy thanked them politely and picked the one closest to him. It had to be said that ring-bearers were treated well in the school. Not only were they respected, but the access to the state-run Wisdom Library was also higher than that of ordinary students. This was a great help to Luoya, who only gained experience by reading historical documents. The personal reading room in the state-run Wisdom Library was not bad. Although it could not be compared to the Nuaw Ayer's personal reading room in the Holy City Royal Library, it still had a simple academic style. A table, a chair, a small bookshelf for books, a coat rack for clothes, a lamp, a white notebook, and a pen. These were all the items in the reading room of the National Wisdom Library. It could be said that it carried out pragmatism and was full of academic style. As a student, Luoya agreed with this. As a student, he should learn knowledge and temper his will, not indulge in luxury. The environment of the library in the holy capital was good, and Roha's identity was the young master of the Akate family, so there was nothing wrong with using the library. But as a student of the St. Freya College, Roha preferred to be simple. Sitting on the chair, Luoya began to study by himself. With no one to disturb him, the teenager's reading speed increased a lot. The ability brought by his bloodline allowed him to read the real part of a book without too much time and extract the essence of a book in the shortest time possible. After 2 nights of dreams, Luoya could basically confirm that the location of his battle was near the academy. Then, after understanding the enemy in the dream, Luo Ye should also understand the battlefield of St. Freya Academy. As a new student, Luo Ye was not familiar with the various facilities of the academy. If he was surrounded by enemies and did not even know how to escape, this was undoubtedly very disadvantageous. Luo Ye had to attend classes every day and did not have much time to walk around the academy, so looking for the academy's architectural design here seemed to be a good choice. Thinking of this, Luo Ye went to the library area, but not long after he looked at the rows of bookshelves and felt troubled. The academy's architectural design, this kind of thing is usually not open to the public. Where can I find it? The latest version of St. Freya Academy's map is located in the library area 3, on the 12th bookshelf. Requires a certain level of authority to borrow it. Is that so? Hearing the answer, Luo Ye turned around and thanked him, but there was no one behind him. This overly strange situation made the youth widen his eyes and look around, but there was only a forest of bookshelves nearby, and the surroundings were also silent. Where's the person? There was a female voice just now. Good afternoon, Your Excellency. Are you looking for me? Behind the strange Luo Ye, the voice came again. Hearing this, the youth suddenly raised his head, only to find that the source of the voice was a shimmering crystal ball. What the hell is this? You are? Respected ring-bearer, artificial elf Margaret is at your service. Artificial elf? What is that? Luo Ye widened his eyes and looked at the light above his head, puzzled. One must know that as a history enthusiast, Luo Ye was not an ignorant youth that could be found everywhere. After so many years of reading, he could be said to be knowledgeable, but even he had never heard of artificial elves. Xia's elves had many legends, such as the origin of the soul, the first life form, and a mess of titles in the academic world, but without exception, they were all high and mighty, unknown to humans. The origin of the elves was not even known, and artificial creation was simply impossible. Besides, even if it was really created, it would be a big news that would shock the entire human world. How could Luo Ye not know? Moreover, he had never seen such a thing appear in Recorder's Eye. It's impossible to artificially create elves, at least not now. What exactly are you? The overly unexpected situation made Luo Ye vigilant, narrowing his eyes and staring at the crystal ball above him as he questioned. Margaret was silent. The crystal ball shone, and the surroundings were silent. Under Luo Ye's sharp gaze, after a long time, the artificial elf finally gave another explanation. Sorry, your authority has not reached the level of unlocking, please understand. Chapter 276. In the evening, the black-haired young man walked out of the library, rubbing his glabella and heading toward the teaching area. There were many blueprints of the state-run Wisdom Library, but they were all very professional designs. As a non-professional, Luo Ye felt deeply exhausted after studying them for an hour. But fortunately, his hard work paid off. After this inspection, Luo Ye figured out the structure of many buildings on campus. In the future, he didn't have to worry about running around like a headless fly in the dream world anymore. And after completing a part of the mission, it was time for him to face his strict teacher again. As usual, Luo Ye walked carefully in the cloak and gave the same command that left him speechless. He pushed open the door to classroom 14 of the first teaching area and gazed at the young lady standing on the podium. His heart couldn't help but skip a beat. She's wearing a purple dress today. At this thought, Luo Ye gazed at the young lady in the classic purple dress. His eyes couldn't help but follow the beautiful curves of Lillian's body. Today, the young lady was still dressed conservatively without revealing her lower body. Compared to before, her waist and chest remained the same, but more of her shoulders were exposed. Around her fair, slender neck was a small bow knot tied with a purple ribbon, making her appear elegant and quiet. Got to say, purple really suited Lillian. On one hand, it matched the young lady's pupils, and on the other hand, it matched her temperament. Mysterious, intelligent, and an ice-cold beauty whose thoughts couldn't be guessed. This was the impression that Lillian gave to him. But for some reason, Luo Ye felt like this beautiful senior was colder toward him today. After pondering for a while, Luo Ye guessed the reason and didn't say much. He sat down obediently and listened to the lesson. Looking at his behavior, Lillian didn't say anything and immediately started tutoring him. No matter what her attitude was, no matter if she was in a negative mood or not, there was no problem with Lillian's tutoring. Her tutoring was as precise and elegant as her swordsmanship. The most frightening thing was that she would always answer every question before Luo Ye even asked a question. In fact, she would even answer the question 1 second before Luo Ye asked a question. This made Luo Ye suspect that she had some sort of mind-reading ability. But it turned out that Luo Ye was overthinking things because Lillian's explanations were comprehensive. She wouldn't stop just because Luo Ye had mastered the part. The young man was helpless about this. But in the process of one-on-one tutoring, Luo Ye didn't dare to slack off in front of his senior no matter what. At the end of the day, this tutoring class was a free meal, and he had even used Chris's favor. If he didn't take it seriously, it would be impolite. Luo Ye was conscientious and meticulous in class. Perhaps Lillian was satisfied with his attitude, so halfway through the class, the two of them started practicing combat. Luo Ye couldn't learn how to control spell power, but it was different for spell power compression. It was first born out of the energy school and mainly pursued the use of spell power. As for putting it into practice, it was fencing. Of course, this fencing wasn't really fencing. Both sides weren't using real swords. Instead, they were using spell power compressed by their own spell power. To put it bluntly, it was Luo Ye's hemp rope. The rules of the competition were simple. Both sides slashed at each other, and whichever side's sword broke would be the loser. Then, a scene similar to the first lesson would take place. Crack! With a soft sound, Luo Ye's hemp rope was cut in half in the collision. The young man looked at the broken spell power in his hand and sighed before reforming it. Meanwhile, Lillian guided him calmly from the side. Didn't I say it before? It's useless to be rough. You need to improve your technique. You don't need to compress it after it's big. Instead, you need to change it from the start. What you're releasing now is like water. You need to make it thicker from the start. Only then will you succeed. Perhaps because Luo Ye's mistake was too obvious, Lillian gave a rare long speech. However, the black-haired young man wasn't enlightened at all. Instead, he had a strange expression on his face, especially when he saw the two of them in their current positions. Spell power fencing was basically done with one's hands. It felt a bit like fighting with chopsticks. That was why Lillian walked down from the podium and stood in front of Luo Ye. Now, the young man's face was facing Lillian's slender belly. Luo Ye's spell started shaking around in the young man's head again, causing his face to turn redder and redder. For some reason, he felt a strange itch in his heart. For a moment, he didn't know whether to look up or down. "What are you waiting for? Start over." An indifferent and cold voice sounded in the young man's ears, causing the feverish Luo Ye to come back to his senses. The young man looked up at Lillian and realized that his senior sister was waiting for him with a glow in her hand. "No, I have to get my mindset right. What does her belly have to do with me?" Clenching his teeth, Luo Ye began practicing again. With Lillian's guidance, Luo Ye's stick finally improved. After more than 10 times, Luo Ye finally withstood a blow. Looking at the red stick that withstood the blow, Luo Ye instantly became spirited. "Senior sister." Crack! But unfortunately, before Luo Ye could raise his head to express his joy, Lillian swept her sword across and broke his waist. Luo Ye's smile froze on his face, and he couldn't continue his sentence. After blinking his eyes, he could only lower his head silently and continue gathering spell power. But perhaps Lillian realized that she had conveniently dampened Luo Ye's enthusiasm. After a slight pause, she stopped her movements, pondered for a moment, and said, "Just like that. Just like before. Continue." Chapter 277. In classroom 14 of the first district, Luo Ye maintained a calm expression and breathed a sigh of relief. On the other side, Lillian Archman was also a little relieved. The black-haired girl put the teaching utensils back in place, then tidied up her clothes and prepared to go out. However, before Luo Ye said goodbye to her, Lillian suddenly stopped as if she remembered something. "What's wrong?" The black-haired boy saw Her Royal Highness Empress, who stopped and turned around. He was worried again, fearing that the girl with great power would go back on her words. However, what he didn't expect was that Lillian didn't come to take back her decision about Paul. Instead, she came to deliver something. "This is for you." The black-haired girl walked quickly to Luoya. Suddenly, she took something out of her pocket and put it on the table. Luoya looked at the table strangely. The next moment, his eyes widened and he fell into a daze. Under the illumination of the light, a pink, furry, and cute rabbit plushie was lying quietly on the table. Its eyes were made of small rubies, its body was made of high-quality fabric, and its ears were stuffed with something that made them look plump and elastic. "Senior, this is Curse Vessel Communicator. I'll lend it to you temporarily." "Hey!" The black-haired girl looked at Luoya's eyes and explained in a flat tone. "It's suspicious if you go out at night. I will tell you through this during the tutoring time in the future. You should know how to use it, right?" "I know, but..." The black-haired boy picked up the rabbit doll on the table sluggishly. His head had not recovered until now. Curse Vessel Communicator was a common means of communication within St. Freya Academy. It was sold in pairs. Generally speaking, as long as both parties with the communicator were near the central campus, then the words written by one party using the paper in the communicator would also appear on the paper of the other party. This small curse vessel, which was convenient to use in a certain area, was very popular in the academy. Luoya naturally heard about it. It was not surprising that Lillian used this to contact him, but why this shape? The pink fluffy doll was nothing for ordinary girls, but Lillian, is this your inner style? Luoya looked up at the cold beauty in front of him, then looked down at the communicator with the girlish heart. His cheeks twitched for a moment. Lillian seemed to find something wrong with Luoya, and her voice suddenly became indifferent. "Is there a problem?" The cold whisper came into his ears. Luoya couldn't help but shiver. He knew that his performance was too obvious and irritating Lillian. At the critical moment, the boy picked up the rabbit doll on the table. When he looked up again, his eyes were shining. When he raised his head again, what a beautiful communicator! This logo is the coffee shop opened by the reclusive Curse Object Master on the commercial street. In other words, this is the super rare limited edition doll curse vessel that can only be obtained by the first guest who enters the door on the day the curse vessel is completed every year. "It's amazing! Senior, how did you get it?" Luoya recalled the girl's anecdote that Xia Luot popularized. He rubbed the fluffy doll and asked with a smile. Hearing Luoya's words, Lillian blinked with some surprise. She didn't expect the boy to know so much. The atmosphere around her relaxed a lot, and the girl thought for a while and replied, "It's not difficult. As long as you figure out the date of her purchase in advance, then observe her daily free time and do some calculations, you can roughly lock the time range of the curse vessel's completion within a few days." "You actually calculated to this extent for this thing? How much do you like it?" Luoya complained wildly in his heart, and the smile on his face couldn't be maintained. He pinched the rabbit's elastic fluffy ears in his hand and hurriedly thanked her. "It's really beautiful. Thank you, Senior Lillian. I will keep it carefully." "Is it? That's good," the black-haired girl said calmly, then turned and left the classroom. Luoya looked at the closed door for a long time, then he looked at the fluffy doll in his hand. Suddenly, he felt that he understood Lillian better. The thing she likes is actually so girly. This is not even the content in the game. But thinking about it, Lillian's dressing actually has some girly elements, but she is too cold, so it can't be shown at all. Why do I feel that she's quite cute? Thinking of Lillian calmly using the rabbit doll communicator, Luoya felt that the picture was inexplicably cute. It made his stereotypical impression of Lillian fade a lot. There was just a problem. This thing, do I have to carry it with me every day in the future? Chapter 278. A month later. In the bedroom of Tsang Hall, the black-haired boy on the bed opened his eyes with the sound of the alarm clock. It had been a month since the beginning of spring. The weather gradually warmed up, and the quilt on Luoya's bed became thinner. Amidst the ringing noise, the boy reached out and gently waved his hand, and the noisy alarm clock was turned off. The disturbing noise disappeared, But unlike before, Luo Ye didn't sit up today. Instead, he laid on the bed and looked at the ceiling to rest. In Shiya, the students also had a rest day. Today was a rest day, so although the alarm clock rang as usual, St. Freya Academy was different from the usual tranquility. But as the saying goes, everyone has their own fate. While others were resting, others were working overtime. Luo Ye's life could be said to be the leader of the overtime world. He was working overtime even in his dreams. Sighing softly, Luo Ye raised his hand and looked at the black rose ring that was still flickering with a faint fluorescent light. His face showed a gratified smile of an old father looking at his child. It's good to grow up again, but it's really tiring. The black-haired boy recalled the situation in the dream and sighed. In the past month, because of the busy work, Luo Ye wore the black rose ring and only slept 7 or 8 times. Every time, he fought with the priority of safety. Basically, he carried out a one-on-one kill on the black-armored soldiers. After many battles, Luo Ye found that the only ones who had the ability to unify the campus at night were the black-clothed clergy. Since Luo Ye appeared, every time they went out, they would bring more than 5 guards with them. And when they weren't there, the black-armored soldiers would gradually disperse over time. Holding his forehead and sighing, Luo Ye felt a headache because of the current chaotic situation. The only thing he could pray for was that he could quickly unlock the Black Rose ring and obtain the second authority, and get some clues from Margaret. During this month, Luo Ye could be said to be extremely busy. Most of his thoughts were occupied by the faction and the consultation department. Fortunately, everything went smoothly. After Paul's hard work, Luo Ye's Rose faction had reached the scale of dozens of people in a month. Although the number of Nua Ir members was not much compared to Xia Luot, and most of them were still in the experimental stage, it was still a faction that was progressing rapidly from scratch. Today, the members of Luo Ye's faction were mainly local students of the country of scholars and the children of aristocrats of small countries other than several major countries. They were all well behaved after preliminary observation. After Luo Ye delegated power to the original protagonist group, Paul also successfully found one of them. Jarek Stevenson, gray hair, blue eyes, short height, relatively thin, and handsome face. He was the son of the Marquis of Pender, the country of knights, and Paul's roommate. In the original Recorder's Eye, he was the good brother of the protagonist Paul and a character who would be of great help to Paul in the future. The Stevenson family was a great aristocrat of Pender, the country of knights. It had a history of hundreds of years. Many of the family's martyrs had participated in the war against the aliens. It could be said that they had many famous generals. They belonged to a military family similar to Luo Ye's Akate family. Of course, in terms of size and influence, the Church of St. Maester was far superior to Pender. The Akate family's status as one of the 5 major aristocratic families was also far stronger than the Stevenson family. Therefore, although they were both sons of marquises, strictly speaking, Jarek's status was far inferior to Luo Ye. Even so, he was still a famous aristocrat. So the question was, why did such a famous family's son, who normally lived in a single room, become Paul's roommate? The answer to this question puzzled Paul for a while until Jarek came to see Luo Ye. In order to show his sincerity, he told him everything. To put it simply, this young master sneaked out because the Stevenson family did not support him to come to St. Freya Academy. Yes, this was the reason why Jarek sneaked out. In fact, in the current student file, Jarek was also using a fake identity. He was using the fake identity of Pender. On paper, he was the son of a businessman and had nothing to do with Pender. When he heard this, Paul was stunned. He looked at the thin man beside him. No matter what, he did not expect that the person who shared a room with him every day was the son of a marquis. At the same time, he was very puzzled that the Stevenson family did not support him to come to St. Freya Academy. In Paul's opinion, the opportunity to become a student of the academy was a dream of many people, but Luo Ye knew a thing or two about this kind of situation. In fact, the problem was not with the Stevenson family, but with Pender. To put it bluntly, Pender was a more abstract country. A considerable number of their traditional aristocrats had the following thoughts. What? Curses? That's something only girls use. Real men should just go up and chop them. It's normal to chop them to death. If you can't chop them to death, it's because you're too weak. Oh, you can learn how to illuminate. That's right, this was the brain and muscle of Pender, the country of knights. It was also the reason why Pender, a big country, had the lowest percentage of students in St. Freya Academy. As a traditional family of knights, the Stevenson family was even more obsessed with the idea of breaking through everything with one force. Therefore, even if Jarrek's talent in physical arts and swordsmanship was far less than his talent in spellcasting, the Stevenson family still wanted him to go to St. Freen Academy in Pender, which was the most famous gathering place of Shia. Jarrek's situation was not an exception. In fact, there were many people like him in Pender. Most of them listened to the arrangements of their families, but a small number of them did not want to waste their talent and would find ways to change their identity and go to St. Freya Academy to study. The so-called industrial chain was created to meet this demand. As for young Master Jarrek's situation, it was actually because he did not bring enough money when he ran out. After a lot of trouble, he did not have much spare money when he arrived in the country of scholars, so he could only live in the cheapest two-person dormitory. After listening to the gray-haired youth's narration, Paul completely understood the situation of his roommate. He lamented that the Marquis had condescended to his status. Luo Ye and Jarrek's eyebrows twitched at the same time. "Have you forgotten that you're a prince?" Luo Ye thought so in his heart, but he did not refute it. Instead, he carefully thought about the situation of Jarrek, the new member. He, who knew part of the plot of Recorder's Eye, actually knew that the reason why the Marquis' son from Pender came to study here was actually only half of the story. If he remembered correctly, the biggest reason why he chose St. Freya Academy instead of St. Freya Academy was to avoid his fiancée, a daughter of the Duke of Pender named Brittany. Unfortunately, his plan was destined to end in failure because Brittany was also a member of the protagonist group. If Luo Ye guessed correctly, she should already be on her way here. Brittany's arrival would cause a commotion, but in the end, she would choose to stay in St. Freya Academy and join the consultation department. In other words, Luo Ye basically obtained two capable people at once, and both of them were the sons of powerful nobles in Pender, the country of knights. After confirming that the faction cadres had a living allowance and lived in Song Hall for free, Jarrek officially applied to join. After Luo Ye approved, in order to frustrate his arrogance, he had a battle with him in the arena. Chapter 279. It was a blood-red letter. If it was in his previous life, Luo Ye might not be surprised. After all, many love letters on Valentine's Day were of this color, which represented sincerity. But in Shia, this color represented an ominous one. After all, people in modern society were used to peace and rarely saw blood, so they were not very sensitive to this color. But in the public security situation, which was far worse than Shia in his previous life, this color would arouse people's vigilance, especially for transcendence. This color of the envelope was an obvious warning. When he found this letter in the mailbox early in the morning, Jellic originally thought it was a letter to cause trouble. After all, because of his roommate Paul, there were always some scoundrels who did not dare to show up at night who would send all kinds of insulting letters to the mailbox of the consultation department. He was very angry about this, but there was nothing he could do. But adhering to the strict style of a military family, Jellic would still take a look at the content even if he was annoyed. But what he didn't expect was that he saw the problem today. This was a letter of entrustment, and it was very long. There were 3 pieces of letter paper, and it could be seen that it was a very serious request. Judging from the handwriting, it was likely to be written by a girl, but the content inside was too strange. The most important thing was that there was no signature. It should be because of the content, so the client used this color of the envelope to attract our attention, but the content inside is really too involved. Jellic handed the letter to Luo Ye with both hands with a heavy expression and explained the reason why he took an hour to rush back from the central campus in the morning. After receiving the letter, Luo Ye did not read it directly, but called a servant to add a chair. "Sit, eat something first." "Ah, thank you, Minister." Feeling Luo Ye's attention, Jellic smiled and sighed for the other party's thoughtfulness. As a student organization, the consultation department naturally couldn't start its business so early. In fact, Jellic didn't have time to move to Pale Hall, and he had the habit of doing morning exercises. Today, when he was running, he found this letter on the way through the mailbox. After noticing that there was a problem, he took the first carriage to Pale Hall, so he definitely didn't eat breakfast. Gerlach was so hungry that he stuffed food into his mouth. Paul was preparing for the meal. Luo Ye stroked the blood-red envelope for a moment, opened the letter, took out the letter and read it. The content of the entire letter was very complicated, but in general, it was a letter asking for help. The content was to ask the consulting department to help find a senior named Shirley Lawrence who might be on campus. However, something strange happened next. Shirley's parents didn't receive their daughter's return in a hurry. Instead, they received a reply letter. The content of the letter was that Shirley had found a job in Leinster, met a boyfriend, and wanted to start a new life. She thanked her parents in the letter and said that she didn't want to go home for the time being. At first, Shirley's parents thought that the letter was sent by their daughter before she learned of her elder brother's death, so they didn't pay much attention to it. But as time passed, Shirley didn't return. The Lawrence couple, who only had one child at home, thought that their daughter couldn't bear to part with her boyfriend, so they traveled a long distance to Leinster to pick her up, only to find that their daughter had already gone missing. More importantly, according to the receipt records of the Leinster post office, Shirley had actually received a letter from her parents. In other words, she already knew that her other children had died. The letter sent back to her hometown was sent a few days after she received it. It wasn't handled personally but sent from a public mailbox to the post office. Then, here came the question. Would a person who knew that all her siblings had died in an accident happily write that she had a new boyfriend and didn't want to go home? Would she give up her right to inherit her family's fortune for a new job? Obviously, this was impossible. Therefore, the Lawrence couple thought that their daughter had been kidnapped and immediately chose to report the case. However, Shirley stayed alone after graduation and didn't have any social connections. The Leinster police didn't find any clues after a round of investigation, so the matter was left unsettled. Although the police gave up, the Lawrence couple didn't. After a round of investigation, they received news that someone had seen Shirley near St. Freya Academy during the few days she went missing. Therefore, they approached the academy, hoping to help with the investigation. However, the relevant personnel of St. Freya Academy were not interested in this matter. After all, Shirley had already graduated. Strictly speaking, she was an off-campus employee. Furthermore, there was no evidence that she had once appeared on campus. In the eyes of the school, this matter was simply caused by the Lawrence couple, who couldn't find their daughter. After a symbolic notice, they sent them away. The Lawrence family was only a business family in a small country. Naturally, they couldn't put pressure on a colossus like St. Freya Academy. However, what they didn't know was that a third-year student who had been taken care of by Shirley had started an investigation after learning about this matter. This was also the origin of this letter. The content of this letter is really complicated. At the dining table, Paul frowned after reading the letter. He could clearly feel that this request was different from the rest. Usually, the requests that the consulting department received were at most about the difficulties that the students encountered in their lives. However, the content of this request was far from trivial. It actually involved a missing person case, and even carried a hint of danger. If this letter was true, then accepting this request was equivalent to the consulting department participating in the investigation of Shirley's missing person case. Once they found clues, it was likely to involve a crime, and the impact would be huge. This was also why Jellic had hurriedly come to Luo Ye after reading the letter. However, if they didn't accept this request, once Shirley was really still on campus and something happened to her, Paul and the others would inevitably blame themselves. Chapter 280. The blood envelope incident was an extremely vile incident, mainly because of its ending and the feeling it gave people. In the game, Recorder's Eye, in Luo Ye's previous life, the blood envelope incident was also taken seriously by Paul and others. After some discussion, they decided to use the stupidest method, which was to use the portrait to find the person. However, this person was not a student, but a coachman in the transportation network of St. Freya Academy. Compared with students who attended classes every day, coachmen were more likely to see people outside the school. In the end, it turned out that some of the coachmen had seen a woman who looked like Shirley, but because the power that the consultation department could mobilize was too small, Paul and others made slow progress. It was only a few days later when they learned the news. Next, Paul and others followed the coachman's instructions to a mountainous area in the academy. During the search, they found the Book of Truth badge of St. Freya Academy with Shirley's name on the back in the bird's nest. After finding this thing, everyone realized that something might have happened to Shirley, so after some hesitation, Paul went to see Lillian. A lost school badge was obviously insufficient as evidence that the owner was kidnapped. Paul could not use it as a reason to persuade the academy to take measures, but Lillian's security department was an exception. The special operations team of the security department was actually Lillian's personal guard. The members were generally third year, and all of them had the strength of source rank 4. They were the real elites who had followed Lillian out for experience. There was no problem in loyalty. They were the team that she cultivated for the future and the strongest armed force in the entire St. Freya Academy. Paul successfully convinced the other party with his relationship with Lillian. Lillian immediately dispatched the security department to conduct a search, and the blood envelope incident was completely exposed to the world. According to the final investigation results, the blood envelope incident was actually a cult murder that had lasted for many years. The culprit was a faculty member in the academy and more than a dozen cultists hiding in the wine cellar in the mountain. This faculty member used his position to check the student information and specifically selected non-aristocratic families like Shirley, who had many siblings, stayed alone in Leinster after graduation, and had no local social connections. He kidnapped and killed them to provide human experiment materials for the cult. In a few years, more than a dozen graduates had been killed. That's right. Senior Shirley, whom Paul and the others had been searching for, was no longer around from the very beginning. Later, they found the underground cellar of the cult's human experiments. There were no scenes of that place in the game. There was only one word to describe it: hell on earth. This incident had a great impact on a series of people, including Paul and Lillian. However, this was not all. The most infuriating and unacceptable thing for Luoya was the outcome of this incident. The sender of the bloody envelope was dead. A few days after the letter was sent, the only person who cared about the Lawrence couple, who had lost all their children, was killed. In fact, she had already been targeted in the process of running and died in the last darkness before the light. On the other hand, her murderer, the clergyman, was alarmed by Paul and the others' vigorous search and successfully escaped from the law with the cultists. The blood envelope incident was a failure. The final outcome was the death of the searcher, the death of the sender, and the escape of the cultists. Justice and justice were not upheld, and the sinners were not judged and punished. This overly real and abominable result dealt a heavy blow to a series of people, including Paul, making him fully aware of his own shortcomings. However, a game was a game. In reality, Luoya could not swallow this shit no matter what. It was purely a joke to let the heinous cultists go unpunished. Luoya had been taken care of by the cultists since he was young, and had even been assassinated. He had a huge grudge against this group of bastards. Those who should live would live, and those who should die would die. This was Luoya's goal, and his priority was the first. Save people first, then kill people. So after receiving the bloody envelope, Luoya, who decided to accept the commission, did not take the path of the original work. Instead, he immediately began to look for the sender of the bloody envelope, hoping to save the only person who still had hope in this incident. However, there was a big problem in this matter. Luoya did not know the identity of the sender. It was not that Luoya's memory was bad, but in the recorder's eye. This paragraph was a narration describing the outcome of the incident that Paul heard. The name and appearance of the sender did not appear in it. The picture was Paul's memory. It was the beginning of the incident, and it was also the last bloody envelope of the sender's life. The lack of this information made Luoya's progress very difficult. The main reason was that the letter appeared late at night. It was basically certain that no one in the consultation department had seen the sender, and it was probably too late to find the possible witnesses. After understanding that there were no direct clues, Luo Ye also thought about whether Margaret of the School of Management would be monitored, but he shook his head when he thought of the building of the consultation department. The place where Margaret existed must have a crystal ball. This thing existed in all major teaching facilities, but there was no such thing in the consultation department building on the edge of the central campus. There was no such thing in the entire student group activity area nearby. After all, Margaret was responsible for managing the college facilities, not the students. It seemed that the only clue was this letter. If he couldn't find it, he could only launch a large-scale search. Luo Ye at the dining table thought so. He opened his eyes and studied it with the other two people. Can you roughly deduce the sender based on this letter? After hearing that Luo Ye wanted to find the sender, Paul had no doubts and decisively supported him. After all, the consultation department was now the front desk of the Blue Rose faction. If they were mobilized on a large scale because of a fictional matter, they would undoubtedly be treated as a joke. Therefore, it was natural to find the sender first to confirm the authenticity of the letter before acting. Regardless of the reason, the three people had the same goal. Under the observation of Luo Ye and others, the sender's identity was indeed revealed. This girl should be from Austin. Hey, brother Luo Ye, how did you know? The sentence. In Paul's surprised gaze, the black-haired boy narrowed his golden eyes and pointed to a sentence in the letter. Chapter 281. An hour later, on the outskirts of the school's central campus, the butterfly dance pavilion. Among the butterflies dancing in the flowers, red roses were blooming everywhere. A black-haired youth leaned on his cane and admired the beautiful scenery nearby, praising Xia Luo's foresight in choosing a place to stay. The Butterfly Dance Pavilion, one of the famous attractions of St. Freya Academy, was located less than an hour's walk from the school's central campus. It had always been popular among the girls, but among the generations of ring-bearers, there were very few who chose it as their personal building. Because unlike Luo Ye's Ashen Hall, this building's annual maintenance cost was astonishingly high. The reason why the butterflies in the Butterfly Dance Pavilion lived so well was because there were many pocket-sized butterfly houses in the building, and the entire garden had a temperature control barrier. The maintenance cost of these facilities not only consumed the school's allocated funds, but also required the ring-bearers to fork out a large sum of money to maintain. One of the greatest benefits of the ring-bearers was having their own personal building and training ground, and they could use the school's funds for free. But this Butterfly Dance Pavilion not only did not save money, but also made people pay for it. This kind of situation was naturally unacceptable to most people, but Xia Luo was an exception. When she heard that this Butterfly Dance Pavilion actually had a DVD of the Austin Empire's Rumen Forest, Xia Luo decisively chose it as her personal building. The school's suggestions were all rejected, and the school could do nothing about this young lady's willful behavior. Who told her to give so much? So this building, which was originally not reserved, was allocated to the young lady of the school's biggest financial backer, the Sorofia family. The renovation process took a month, and the entire Wild Rose faction was broken up in this month. Until now, they had not moved yet, so it was quite secluded. Luo Ye smelled the fragrance nearby, and turned his head to observe the butterflies that were motionless on his shoulder. Behind him, the reddish-brown-haired girl held a blood-red envelope in her hand and carefully observed it. "Dear, is this the only letter?" Seeing that Xia Luo seemed to be in a difficult situation, Luo Ye turned around and asked. The reddish-brown-haired girl thought for a moment and nodded lightly. "Yep. Although I don't have a name or specific information, she used a spell, so the specific divination conditions are valid. However, the more vague the conditions are, the more vague the results will be. So, you need to be mentally prepared. It doesn't matter. Just give me a general range," Luo Ye said as she spread out the map of St. Freya Academy on the table. The reddish-brown-haired girl nodded and took out an Austin Empire gold coin and walked to the table. Using gold coins from the Austin Empire from hundreds of years ago can probably increase the accuracy. The rest will depend on the traces of the spell she left behind. As Xia Luo spoke, A strong wave of curse power began to spread from her body to the surroundings. Her ancient bloodline boiled under the influence of the young girl. A starry sky appeared behind Xia Luot, and an ancient god shadow protected her under its body. It held a scepter in one hand and a scale in the other. It was the arbiter of fate. Ding! At this moment, light gathered in Xia Luot's hand. With a flick of her finger, a dark golden coin was thrown into the air. After a long flip, it landed on the table where the map was placed. After bouncing for a long time, the coin was deducted, and the final result of the divination was revealed. This place is... The reddish-brown-haired girl's spell power slowly retracted, and the golden divine elephant also disappeared. Xia Luot walked to the side of the map and looked carefully. She found that the coin was located in a dormitory area near the central campus. This is the third dormitory area. The buildings are relatively new and close to the commercial street. It's a single-room dormitory, and the accommodation fee is more expensive than the first dormitory area. Generally, it's for the wealthier nobles, and most of them are girls. The black-haired boy recalled the map of the academy and the information he collected in the past month. He gently picked up the coin on the table and revealed several buildings in the southwest corner of the third dormitory area. His heart that had been hanging in the air finally relaxed a little. "Dear, is this okay? If it's in the dormitory, the flow of people?" "No, it's enough." Because the third dormitory area was relatively high-end, the buildings only had 5 floors, and each floor had 2 residents. In other words, each building had only 10 people, and there were about 100 students in the southwest corner. Among these 100 students, it was impossible to find a girl who was born in the Austin Empire, who was good at the School of Transformation, and who was in contact with Senior Shirley. As for the specific investigation, it was actually a small problem, because Luo Ye was not alone now. The entire consultation department, as well as the Green Rose faction behind her, would take action. Save the sender and bring the villain to justice. This time it must be. Luo Ye tapped her fingers on the table and made up her mind. In the evening, Luo Ye walked alone in the shadows of the dusk, looking at the road ahead silently. After Xia Luot divined the approximate living area of the sender this afternoon, the members of the Green Rose faction, which Luo Ye belonged to, began to secretly investigate the residents in this area using various relationships and reasons. So far, half of the people had been investigated. Although there were no results for the time being, it was estimated that they would be able to lock onto the target tomorrow. According to the situation of the original work, the sender was killed by the teacher a few days after the letter was sent. In general, there was still enough time left for the consultation department, so Luo Ye was not too anxious. Instead, he was steady in his anxiety. After handing these matters over to Paul and the others, he did not intervene. He believed that Paul, as the protagonist of the original work, had the ability to handle it well. As for Luo Ye himself, he began to weave a web. Although the mastermind of the series of serial murders of graduates was the teacher, the purpose of the blood envelope incident was to provide the evil cult with human experiment materials. The real root of the evil was the cult. If he did not eradicate it, how could he face the students who were tragically murdered? At least, Luo Ye would never be satisfied. Chapter 282. In the Linglong Pavilion, which was famous for its exquisite interior decorations, a black-haired young man and a young lady sat opposite each other in the reception room. The atmosphere between them was rather solemn. Just half an hour ago, Luo Ye visited Lillian alone and explained what he knew about the situation. That's right. Luo Ye didn't go to the bird's nest in the forest to search for Senior Shirley's badge like Paul did in the original work. He came to the Linglong Pavilion without any evidence and directly laid his cards on the table with Lillian. One of the reasons why Luo Ye did this was that he didn't want to waste time and alert the enemy. Another reason was that he knew his advantages. People of different identities would have different weight when they said the same thing. Although this sentence was somewhat suspicious, it was the truth to a certain extent. Luo Ye was different from Paul in the original work. He wasn't an illegitimate child of the Austin Empire who was ostracized. Instead, he was one of the 6 ring-bearers who had the highest decision-making power in St. Freya Academy. The consultation department was no longer a small fry department, but a powerful department supported by the members of the Blue Rose faction. As long as it came from Luo Ya's mouth, it carried considerable weight even if there was no evidence. And the relationship between Luo Ya and Lillian was no longer one of Paul's request for help in the original work. Instead, it was a collaboration. Luo Ya's consultation department would provide specific information on the possible hiding spots of the cultists and provide some support. The Nazis' special operations team would be the main force in the encirclement and suppression operation. This was the cooperation plan that Luo Ya proposed. Originally, dealing with cultists should be the specialty of the Saint Maester theocracy. But due to the fact that most of the Nuo Iyer students were in their first years, most of them were still at level 5 of the source rank, which was a whole level lower than Lillian's Nazi elites. This difference in combat strength made Luo Ya decide to give up. The reason was that this time, Luo Ya was pursuing a complete victory. That was his goal from the start. On the other hand, this matter was also within the Nazis' responsibility. They received a lot of resources from the academy, so it was their duty to ensure public safety. Luo Ya thought as she held the teacup, silently waiting for the girl's decision. After a detailed consideration, the black-haired girl finally nodded slowly. "I understand. I will personally lead a team to the vicinity of Foster Station and launch a quick attack on the cultists' hiding spot." "I see. I didn't expect senior sister to believe me so quickly." Luo Ya, who was prepared to waste his breath, was interrupted by Lillian. He couldn't help but turn to her in surprise. Upon hearing his question, Lillian nodded calmly. "Although there is no evidence, I don't think you would lie about such a serious matter." Her Royal Highness calmly stated the reason for her trust in him, and Luo Ya couldn't help but smile. However, what Luo Ya didn't know was that along with his brilliant smile, Lillian's body couldn't help but pause for a moment. Her purple eyes that sparkled with wisdom stayed on his body for a long time before she lowered her gaze. It was this feeling again. The black-haired girl picked up the teacup and sniffed the steaming aroma. Her fingers gently slid along the edge of the teacup, and she couldn't help but sigh inwardly. "I don't know what's wrong with me recently." In the past month, Lillian and Luo Ya spent a lot of time together. They attended classes together during the day and had to make up lessons at night. Through this constant contact, especially the practice of the spell compression class, Lillian naturally had a certain degree of understanding of Luo Ya. He was serious in his studies, tenacious in the face of difficulties, and unwilling to admit defeat. However, his personality wasn't too strong and was more of a gentle type. But just like the murderous aura in the beginning, Lillian also discovered some peculiarities about this young man. For example, Luo Ya had a lot of troubles in his heart that didn't match his age. The so-called troubles in one's heart were the product of worry, fear, vexation, and other emotions piled up together. Its creation was inevitably accompanied by enormous pressure. In other words, Luo Ya lived in a high-pressure environment almost all year round. Before coming into contact with Luo Ya, Lillian couldn't imagine this at all because Luo Ya had almost no external reaction to this pressure. He was probably used to it. Perhaps the people around him and even Luo Ya himself didn't realize it. But in the process of interacting with his spells, Lillian inexplicably felt like she could read him. If Luo Ya was a book, then Lillian's tutoring was like accidentally flipping open the cover of the book. The interaction of spells was like reading time. Although it wasn't long every day, it constantly deepened Lillian's understanding of Luo Ya. More importantly, Lillian's state of mind gradually changed. Lillian had a strange emotion that she didn't know where it came from. It was a wonderful emotion mixed with heartache and pity. This emotion made the usually cold Lillian think of some inexplicable things when teaching Luo Ya. Was it too harsh to say that? Considering his enthusiasm, it was fine to go easy on him a little. Such thoughts that had never crossed Lillian's mind when she was tutoring Luo Ya in the past flashed through Lillian's mind. Lillian liked how Luo Ya would smile brightly whenever he improved or when he heard her ambiguous words of praise. She couldn't help but stare at Luo Ya for a while every time. Fortunately, Luo Ya was quite slow in this aspect and didn't pay attention to it. On the other hand, Lillian hated how disappointed he was. Every time she saw him, she would feel as if something was pressing down on her heart. She would subconsciously tone down some of her harsh words. This time, Luo Ye came to visit her alone. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to describe what he said as shocking. But even so, Lillian still believed him after analyzing the situation. It could be said that this was inseparable from the 1 month they spent together. You said before that the consultation department has identified 2 suspicious locations. In that case, my operation team will also be split into 2. We will each lead a team. That way it will be safer. Lillian took a sip of tea as she sensed the subtle emotions in her heart. But to her surprise, Luo Ye actually hesitated after hearing her words. Then, he said something that Lillian couldn't help but frown slightly. "Senior sister, I have some other ideas about this." The black-haired young man thought for a while and told her his battle plan. Chapter 283. Murti Sani, a third-year girl. She wasn't tall, had a slightly thin figure, and had black hair and blue eyes. Her appearance was typical of the Austin Empire. St. Freya Academy was an academy where more than half of the nobles in Shia gathered. Although the Sani family had some assets, the identity of a viscount's daughter wasn't that noble. In addition, Murti's results in actual combat were mediocre. Therefore, even though she was a third-year Austin, she didn't join Lillian's Purple Rose faction. She met Shirley in a small musical instrument club. The 2 of them were juniors and had performed together at the academy's anniversary last year. It could be confirmed that they had a deep friendship. After reading the entire report, the black-haired young man at the end of the long table crossed his arms and pondered. On both sides, Paul and Gerlach, who had heard Luo Ye's summary of the incident, also had heavy expressions, waiting for the next instructions. They had to admit that the current situation had completely exceeded their expectations of this strange department. Originally, Paul only wanted to set up an organization to help students in trouble, just like how Luo Ye had helped him. The worst-case scenario was to prevent school violence. But now, they were unexpectedly involved in such a terrifying incident. That's right, this blood envelope incident was a cult incident that involved dozens of murders. It was a major case in any country's capital. What was even more terrifying was that this incident was like all other cult incidents. Only a small number of people could fully believe it. The teaching staff couldn't be trusted, the coachmen couldn't be trusted, and the majority of the students couldn't be trusted. They could only rely on some members of the 2 factions. The third-year students who had experienced experience were still fine, but for the first-year students who had just entered the academy, this test paper was seriously out of their scope. In the quiet conference room, Paul repeated his deep breaths. His palms were sweating. In his half-year life as a prince and more than 10 years of farming life, he had never seen such a huge evil act. Gerlach, who was sitting opposite him, also had an ugly expression. The reason why the 2 of them were able to remain calm was largely because of the black-haired young man in front of them. After discovering their situation, Luo Ye opened her golden eyes and calmly persuaded them. Remember, don't panic when you encounter something big. It's useless to panic. Looking at the immature Paul in front of him, Luo Ye understood in his heart, but he also knew that this was something he had to go through. A truly strong person isn't someone who doesn't know fear, but someone who can overcome fear. A truly noble person isn't someone who doesn't know evil, but someone who can resist evil. Paul can become that kind of person, but it still takes time and a little help from Luo Ye occasionally. This raid on the evil cult gathering point is a joint operation between our 2 factions. Although Blue Hall's strength isn't enough, we still need to send some people. That is, the 2 of you and the elites who have been in the source class for more than a year. To all of you, my only request is for you to be safe. How many of you go must return? Don't fight with Purple Rose for credit. We have worked so hard for so long. Our only goal is to see justice be served. Nothing else is important. In terms of the combat power of the team, your level has already far surpassed that of an ordinary judgment team of the Holy See. The only flaw is that you are not mentally prepared. We can't make up for this, so we might as well not make up for it. I'll just talk about my personal experience instead. Luo Ye stared at Paul and the others in front of him and said concisely, "Kill him." Minister? Remember, I don't care about the difference in strength. When you see the evil cult members, kill them. I don't need the evil cult captives. What I need is for you to come back alive. If anything happens, I will bear the responsibility. Brother Luoya. Hearing the young man's words, Paul and Gerlach understood the style of this operation. They were moved. Luoya smiled. It's good that you understand the focus of the operation. I can't care about the rest. After all, I have to carry out my own mission next. The black-haired young man said and silently picked up the information on the table. Sorry, we don't have any news about Shirley here. She hasn't been here since graduation. Oh, I see. Thank you, sorry to bother you. In the musical instrument store on the commercial street, a long-haired and artistic girl politely thanked the store manager after listening to his words. She turned her head and left with some disappointment. On the morning of the rest day, the commercial street was bustling with people. The dating couples were laughing and chatting happily. However, Melty, who was walking on the street, felt like she was in two different worlds. More than a week ago, Murdy met the parents of her former good friend, Senior Shirley, who had taken care of her. When they found out that Shirley was suspected to have gone missing in the academy, everyone else thought that it was the nonsense of an old couple who had lost all their children. Only Murdy was shocked and realized that something wasn't right. This was naturally not because the girl had any special ability. In fact, the reason why Melty was sure that Shirley was missing on campus was that she had a clue that others didn't know. That was the Curse Vessel Communicator. Curse Vessel Communicators were generally sold in pairs, and many of them were cute dolls. It was common for girls to give each other gifts to show their friendship. Shirley once received a communicator from Melty as a gift. It was a rather cute cat-style communicator. When the two parties were in the communication range, the doll's eyes would light up and it would meow when it received the communication. Melty clearly remembered that one night after the start of the new semester, the cat's eye stone did light up for a short period of time. That time was around Shirley's disappearance. The girl was sure that Senior Shirley had indeed come to the college. However, there was no conclusive evidence. It was impossible to convince anyone with just one side of the story. For the friendship in her heart, for the Lawrence couple who lost their child, the righteous Melty launched an investigation alone. It had been more than a week so far, but everything was not as she wished. Chapter 284. St. Freya Academy's monthly break was a total of 5 days. This was a great thing for Luoya because no matter how the students of the security department and the consultation department tried to hide it, their absence during classes couldn't be covered up. That's right. Lillian's special operations team, Paul, and the others had secretly hidden in the forest near Forster Station. Due to the distance and time constraints, they couldn't attend classes and carry out missions at the same time. Although the absence of a few people in a large class with hundreds of people wouldn't be noticed, the absence of teachers like Lillian and Luoya was still very obvious. Although Luoya felt that the possibility of there being cultists among the students was relatively low, he still couldn't completely rule out this possibility. Once the matter was exposed, this operation would become a wasted effort. The only reward was probably to protect the sender. Therefore, the best time to act was before the end of the holiday. According to Luoya's memories, the enemy did indeed make a move during this period. If he guessed correctly, it should be at the end of the holiday, right before everyone was busy preparing for classes. And the location of the crime was in this room. In the dormitory building, the black-haired young man calmly informed the black-haired girl in front of him of his investigation results. He didn't hide anything from her. Before this, he had considered telling her part of the truth to calm her emotions, but after thinking about it, he dismissed the idea. What Luoya needed the most now was for Melty to have a clear understanding of her situation. Only then could he prevent her from doing some impulsive actions that would give others an opportunity to take advantage of her. But inevitably, when she heard that Shirley was targeted by the cultists and that her fate was unknown, the girl couldn't help but cry uncontrollably. "I'm sorry, sir. I can't help it," Melty said as her tears fell uncontrollably. Luoya looked at the girl and didn't say anything. He knew that Melty needed to be released now. The grief of her good friend's calamity and the fear of being targeted by the cultists were too heavy for a young girl, but it was also something she couldn't escape from. But unlike in the game, Luoya was by her side now. Miss Melty, I understand the pain and fear in your heart, but I have to tell you that you're not alone now. Your actions aren't meaningless. The black-haired youth looked at the crying girl and did not say anything to comfort her. Instead, he told her the truth in the most gentle tone. Although I'm the only one here, there are hundreds of people who are supporting this operation and working hard behind the scenes, including our two teams who are about to clash head-on with the cult. I know your fear, but please trust us. Trust our determination to protect you and defend justice against evil. Senior Shirley's tragedy is heart-wrenching, but what you've done isn't in vain. Because of your kindness and integrity, we've learned of the numerous crimes that the enemy has hidden in the darkness. Countless people will be saved because of this, and the deceased will also be able to rest in peace. Miss Melty, you can be proud of yourself. At least, you didn't disappoint the name of St. Freya Academy student. In this incident, you've done well enough. Under the youth's gentle praise, the girl finally burst into tears. The tiredness of the past few days also surged up. After a long time, Melty's crying gradually subsided. Only then did Luoya speak of his purpose, which was to wait here for the main culprit and protect her. Without a doubt, Luoya's purpose was risky. Melty could have refused, but after hearing that this was the only way to bring the main culprit to justice, the girl decisively agreed. After a conversation, the exhausted girl returned to her bedroom to rest. Listening to Melty's steady breathing next door, Luoya reached into his pocket and took out a delicate little lock. Macaron's hideout. The great curse maker, Macaron, created a hideout to escape the enemy's pursuit. When he closes the lock disguised as an accessory, no one can find him again. As for using it to observe the ladies taking a bath in his later years, that's another matter. Equipment effect. Inject curse power, close the lock, and the body will be locked in a small fault space. Restriction condition. No large-scale movement, no curse power fluctuation in the space. Price. 200,000 points. That's right, this was the first time Luoya bought the accessory-like lock at its original price since he owned the system. This was the reason why Luoya was confident that he could protect Melty without alerting the enemy. Macaron's hideout was a rare space curse item. It could form a small fault in the space within a few meters of Luoya, making him unable to observe from here. However, due to the instability of the space, once Luoya ran out of the range or used a curse, the space would crack and disappear. This property made Macaron's hideout difficult to use for a sneak attack because he must come out first if he wanted to attack. However, it was still very useful for sneak attacks, hiding, or in this special period. The young man sat down on the sofa in the living room, then reached out to his waist and buckled the lock. At the moment when the lock was closed, a strange fluctuation came from his waist. Everything in Luoya's vision seemed to be covered with a layer of gray color in an instant. From this moment on, Roha's influence on the real world was completely eliminated. For example, although he was sitting on the sofa in this space, there was no trace of him on the sofa in the real world. There wasn't even a dent in it. The black-haired young man looked at everything around him and nodded with satisfaction, then he closed his eyes to rest. Look at what you've done, Matthews. In a dark room, a stack of documents on the table under the candlelight was slammed down. Two black-robed men sat opposite to each other at the table. One was a middle-aged man named Matthews, and the other was a masked man with a hoarse voice. At this time, Matthews, who was called by his name, bowed his head and did not speak. His eyes were on the top of the documents on the table. There was a portrait of a third-year female student at St. Freya Academy. Seeing Melty's portrait, Matthews thought for a moment and said with some respect, "I have noticed her, Sir Apostle. All her actions are under my control. You don't need to worry." "Under your control? Oh, that's why I said that you people can't do anything big. This kind of person who finds a problem should be dealt with immediately as soon as there is a sign. She has been acting for a week. What are you waiting for?" Chapter 285. It had been 3 days since Luo Ya's ambush. In these 3 days, Melty's life didn't change at all. According to her plan with Luo Ya, she still ran to a few fixed places every day. The commercial street, the musical instrument club, and the coffee shop were all places that Shirley had been to before. However, they were all public places with a lot of people during the holidays. Every time before nightfall, the girl would return to the dormitory with the crowd. She couldn't be alone, but she couldn't do nothing either. She had to ensure her safety and numb the enemy. This was Luo Ya's request for Melty. But it had to be said that this was a lot of pressure for an untrained young girl. Walking on the commercial street, Melty felt uneasy. Ever since Luo Ya told her the truth, the girl felt that she was being watched by someone. Although she tried her best to ignore it, the sixth sense was very serious today. A sense of crisis that was far stronger than usual grew in the girl's heart. Melty almost subconsciously understood one thing. The cultists were about to make their move. The girl's face stiffened and her hands trembled slightly. Her friends noticed that something was wrong with Melty and asked her about it with concern. The girl was silent for a moment. Luo Ya's warning and her senior's face appeared in her mind. In the end, she resisted the fear and smirked, attributing it to the pain of her period. This explanation was reasonable and didn't arouse anyone's suspicion. Melty followed the crowd back to the dormitory and closed the door. Then she walked to the living room and hugged the pillow on the sofa. "Master, are you there?" "I'm here." The voice echoed in the girl's ears. Melty held back her tears for a long time. The girl hugged the pillow to cover half of her face and apologized with a hoarse voice. "I'm sorry, Master, Melty was sobbing on the side, and in the dark space, the black-haired boy was sitting opposite her, looking at the frightened girl and sighing. "Hold on. I have a feeling that he will appear soon. This is the last moment." The gentle voice comforted the girl and made Melty nod slightly. After a long time, the girl wiped the tears on her face and finally forced herself to calm down. "Master Luo Ya, I'm sorry. I'm too timid." "No, you're already very brave." The black-haired boy looked at the strong girl and couldn't help but feel heartache. This tragedy really hurt too many people. Melty, who had persevered for so long, was almost at her limit. "It's time to end it." The boy held the cane thought and silently made a promise. "If I'm not wrong, there will be changes tonight. I swear to Shiya, I will protect you. There shouldn't be a problem." In the forest in the southwest corner of the third dormitory area, a middle-aged man wearing a teacher's robe coldly stared at Murty's room. His hanging heart gradually calmed down. Although the apostle's strict orders made Matthews nervous, after a day of observation, Matthews didn't see anything wrong with Melty's actions. From the time she woke up and left the house to the places she went to, they were all the places she had been running around for the past few days. Although she had returned to the dormitory a little earlier these 2 days, that was nothing. As a student, she had been running around under the pressure of the academy for a week without any results. She didn't dare to feel tired or nervous. On the other hand, because the apostle was afraid of the new student, Matthews took the time to observe the so-called consultation department. However, the results made him feel less nervous. In the past few days, the so-called consultation department had students from the Purple Rose faction coming to cause trouble. Facing the third-year members of the Purple Rose, the first-year members of the consultation department were afraid. It was said that the 2 permanent deputy heads didn't dare to come. Every day, they stayed in the station to discuss countermeasures with that Luo Ya Akat. In order to avoid being seen as retreating, the Purple Rose faction even dug up a swimming pool and hired a bunch of coachmen to transport the soil. This kind of cowardly behavior made Matthews laugh. What Akat family? Isn't it just a noble family from the theocracy? How oversensitive. After his observation, Matthews did not care about the apostles' reasons for urging him. In his opinion, the apostles were once bitten, twice shy. The Akat family might have been a threat to them in the past, but that was all in the past. Fierce in one generation, how could they be fierce in the next? In the past few decades, Matthews had never heard of any big news about the Akat family. He didn't know much about them and had no interest in them. In his opinion, Leinster was the place with the highest density of extraordinaires. Any random scholar family would be much more powerful than them. Luo Ye was just a talented kid with a level 4 source. What could he do? Moreover, he was now being suppressed by the Purple Rose. The relationship between the two parties had worsened because of the confrontation before school started. He, who was in the academy, had seen it with his own eyes. Chapter 286. After 3 days of not eating, drinking, or sleeping, Luo Ye successfully waited for the prey. At the same time, in the nearby forest, the black-haired girl opened her eyes at Paul's reminder. The twin stone was a magic or unique to Xia. It was generally born when two were joined together. After being cut apart, when one of them was injected with curse power and emitted light, the magic in the other or would also be stimulated. A crimson light flickered in the small stone in Paul's hand like blood, as if reflecting the surging killing intent under Lillian's calm appearance at this time. The girl stood up, and the nearby guards in the name of the security department immediately stood up together and quickly divided into 2 teams according to the previous plan. Let's go. It was a simple sentence, but it carried a weight that was completely different from usual. In the darkness of the night, the group split into 2 groups and rapidly approached their destination. At the same time, the hoarse caws of crows rang out in the wine cellar. The butchers who were stained with human blood raised their heads and looked at each other. News from the bishop. There's a situation. Evacuate according to the plan. With the announcement, the cultists were busy, but they didn't know that everything was already too late. Screams. This was the sound that the soft-hearted Luo Ye disliked the most in the past because it represented pain. When it appeared, it represented suffering and was often a harbinger of bad things. However, today's matter was different. In the house, listening to Matthew's screams, Luo Ye's depression that had accumulated for 3 days seemed to have been vented. The smile on his face became more and more brilliant with the passionate tone of his voice. The screams of a sinner may not be pleasant to the ears, but it was indeed satisfying. The teenager who hated evil as if it were his enemy commented, while the person who screamed leaned against the wall with an ashen face. Fellow student, what are you trying to do? Attacking a teaching staff is a serious violation of the law and school rules. Matthews, who only had one arm left, roared angrily, eager to buy as much time as possible. Since Luo Ye appeared here, the situation was obvious. The first-year ringmaster and his department, whom Matthew had always looked down on, had seen Meldy's letter. Not only that, but they also carried out a secret investigation and even released a lot of smoke bombs. Luo Ye himself was waiting here. They had been exposed, so they had to retreat immediately. Matthew thought so in his heart, but on the surface, he looked like he was just passing by innocently. Secretly, he began to condense his curse power to control his injuries and prepare a killer move, waiting for the moment when Luo Ye hesitated. Matthews was certain that he had to severely injure Luo Ye before he could escape. This was because he had seen part of Luo Ye's battle when he first entered the academy. This was also the reason why he did not rush out of the room. Outside the dormitory was a forest with no mountains or rivers. Once they reached an open area, Luo Ye's Goulandaire would be able to unleash its full potential. Matthew didn't want to race against the huge skeleton on flat ground. That was undoubtedly a dead end. I'm just a teacher on patrol. I came in to take a look after noticing a strange spell fluctuation in this room. That should be why you're hiding here. What are you trying to do? With this thought in mind, Matthew asked the young man in front of him in a righteous manner. Under his realistic acting skills, Luo Ye seemed to have really begun to hesitate. After a short silence, the black-haired young man's face flashed with surprise. He hurriedly asked, "You're a teaching staff of the academy. Do you have any evidence?" "I have a teaching staff ID in my pocket. I'm Matthew Scholar, the director of the Student Information Office." "You're Luo Ye, right? I know your mentor. I'll never let this matter go." "What? You're not a cultist who came to take Melty's life?" This is a misunderstanding. The identity of a teaching staff played a big role at this time. The black-haired young man seemed to be really stunned by Matthew's mixed words. He was stunned at first, then he waved his hand in a panic. he eagerly explained while injecting his curse power into the cane. I heard that this student was targeted by a cruel cultist, so I came to wait for her. I didn't expect to alarm my own people. This is really an unfortunate accident. Teacher, let me treat you. The black-haired young man picked up the cane with an apologetic expression. His face was full of guilt and sincerity. Matthew looked at the young man and then looked at the cane in Luo Ye's hand. He could not help but be shocked. What a strong vitality aura. Although Shi Ye's curses and treatment methods were many, most of them had their flaws. For example, the Vatican's curses would divide a large part of the curse power to purify the body, and the human manipulation system's flesh and blood manipulation could easily cause the body to grow crooked. Only the form of vitality replenishment was the safest and most reliable treatment. Such an advanced treatment method must be very effective. Matthew, who had lost his arm and was in unbearable pain, thought so. His eyes lit up, and at the same time he could not help but sneer in his heart. Hee, after all, he's just a kid. An idiot with strength but no experience. He panicked after a little scare. Chapter 287. The bloody light in the forest gradually dissipated, and the bloody rain turned into steaming smoke. The students who ran out of the third dormitory building looked in the direction of the forest in a daze. Some of them even suspected that they were in a dream. The horrifying flesh giant turned into ashes in the light, and the huge skeleton that defeated it was no longer there. Under the dark night, the remnants of the curse power drifted with the wind, dotting the forest like a dream. If it weren't for the fact that some people still had headaches, and the unconscious students had yet to wake up, perhaps everyone would have thought that the previous situation was an illusion. Among the confused crowd, only the girl with long black hair behind the broken window and the members of the consultation department who rushed over knew the details. The excited voices of the teenagers echoed in her ears. Murdy looked at the place where the huge skeleton disappeared, and tears of joy burst out of her eyes. Although the process was difficult, justice eventually defeated evil. The shining fist of Gulandair was like a ray of hope, releasing the depressed members of the consultation department and Murdy. In the forest, Luo Ye slowly approached Matthew, who had fallen to the ground. At this time, the middle-aged man was badly mutilated, and his teacher's robe had turned into rags. The exposed organs in his cut-open chest were still struggling and beating, and the ends of the broken blood vessels occasionally spurted out blood. Luo Ye looked at the heinous villain and frowned. Although Matthew was not dead, more than half of his vitality had been consumed in the sacrifice, and he might not survive the night. Seeing Luo Ye coming, the cultist, whose face was devoid of skin, weakly cried for help. "Save me! Save me!" Matthew struggled with all his might, and his eyes were filled with the fear of death. However, Luo Ye was unmoved, and her expression did not even change. Treating the cultist was purely out of her mind. It was probably the stupidest thing that Shi Ye could do. After all, once the cultist regained his breath, he could sacrifice or use the secret technique again in minutes. He might even be able to kill the cultist. "Do you think I'm a good guy? I have information. I'll tell you the information." Information? Luo Ye raised her eyebrows when she heard Matthew's words. The middle-aged man struggled for a moment and hurriedly said, "Do you think killing me will end this? Our blood sacrifice church is just a small organization. We are nothing in the eyes of those big guys. They are planning something big, just like 400 years ago." Go on it. Matthews? Luo Ye narrowed his eyes at the sudden interruption of the middle-aged man's words. But before he could get closer, Matthew's body suddenly began to inflate like a balloon. The next moment, black flames erupted from the depths of his body, enveloping him in a flash. "Ah! Matthew!" Luo Ye suddenly took a step forward, but it was too late. Matthew screamed in front of him, twitched slightly, and then died completely. His dying body quickly turned into a pile of bones in a few seconds. He was dead. Matthews died just like that. Luo Ye stared at the pile of smoking charred bones in front of him. His eyes widened in disbelief. As a heinous cultist, Matthew's death was not to be regretted, but he should have died after receiving a fair trial or after confessing information about other hidden cultists, rather than in this situation. Damn it. Matthew, who was about to become a witness, had died. This made the black-haired young man furious. It was obvious that he had been silenced without even knowing that he had been tampered with. It should be Matthew's words that triggered this spell, but can't you say it faster? At the very least, he should finish his sentence. 400 years ago is just a point in time. What can I know? Even if I say one more word. Luoya gripped his cane angrily, but there was nothing he could do. He stared at Matthew's bones for a long time with a gloomy face, but in the end, he could only give up. Half an hour later, a black-haired teenager stepped down from the carriage at Forster Station. It was Luoya who had just dealt with Matthew's side. After returning to the third dormitory area and confirming that Melty was safe and had been protected by the members of the consultation department, Luoya immediately rushed to the other side of the battlefield. Now that their leader was exposed and dead, it was basically impossible for the cultists to have any reinforcements, but even so, Luoya was still a little worried. Matthew's self-sacrifice was still in front of him. The cultists could play too many tricks. Paul and others were still inexperienced. Death may be avoided, but there might be serious injuries. Luoya was here to extend people's lives. With the help of the Holy One's dagger and Pei Tila, he could deal with the injuries caused by the cultists in an emergency. Of course, another reason was that Matthew's words before he died made Luoya faintly uneasy. Perhaps there was something deeper that was hard to discover spying on the city and the academy. It must be an organization that was far more powerful than the Blood Sacrifice Church. Regardless, now that he had learned of this, he had to discuss it with Lillian. Chapter 288. This is it, right? That hell on earth. Recalling the human test site described in the original work that brought a strong impact to everyone, Luoya's heart was as heavy as lead for a while. He also understood why the current situation was so weird. These security department soldiers did not cry because of casualties, and Paul and the others were not weak people who would vomit for half an hour just because of a smooth battle. They should have already gone back and forth down there. The physical disgust for these crimes and cultists, and the sympathy for the seniors who were killed, these feelings were tangled together, making these relatively pure and kind-hearted students feel terrible. Luoya gritted his teeth, and the hatred for the cultists in his heart soared again. He walked to the wall and patted Paul's back. The two completed the information exchange in the sound of vomiting. According to Paul, when the twin stones lit up, the action team was divided into two teams and attacked from both sides. As a result, Paul's side was luckier as they met the Blood Sacrifice Church who were preparing to evacuate. It turned out that as Luoya and others expected, the Blood Sacrifice Church also had the means of long-distance signal transmission like the action team. The two teams met at the gate of the manor. Paul and Gerlach, who remembered Luoya's order, did not say anything. They immediately launched a set of attacks and fired the first shot of the battle. However, unlike the fast combat of ordinary Transcended, the third-year security department action team was well-trained, far beyond the expectations of Paul and others. They did not adopt close combat, but they used bows and curses to restrain the enemy. At the same time, they fired curse signal flares to call for reinforcements. This set of tactics could be said to be the biggest reason why they only had light injuries in this battle. It turned out that the tactics of the security department played a great role. The Blood Sacrifice Church launched sacrificial witchcraft several times during the battle, turning some members into bloody monsters. At one point, they posed a serious threat to the action team. However, with the advantage of numbers and strength, Paul and others successfully held on until the arrival of Lillian's team. The next situation was very simple. Under Lillian's leadership, the team pushed forward all the way. Of the 28 cultists, 3 were arrested, and the rest were all killed on the spot. Now I saw it. Moreover, it's a strengthened version of the tentacle's mouth. The smell is much stronger than yours. After listening to Paul's description, Luoya raised his eyebrows and did not speak. He looked around and found that Lillian was not nearby. He then turned to ask Paul. After hearing Luoya's question, the latter looked unnatural. Royal sister, she didn't come out after going in. She even ordered everyone to leave. Paul looked at the entrance of the cellar with blood flowing like a monster's mouth and said with an ugly expression. The nearby security department students looked worried when they heard this. Luoya was stunned for a moment before he suddenly recovered and stared at the cellar with his eyes wide open. That's right, Lillian should be the one who suffered the greatest impact in this cellar. Luoya, who suddenly remembered some plots in the game, frowned. He looked at Paul, who was worried but didn't take any action. After thinking for a moment, he stepped forward. Brother Luoya? What are you? Senior Lillian said that you're not allowed to enter, but she didn't say that I'm not allowed to enter. The black-haired young man endured the pungent smell of blood and walked to the entrance of the cellar. He then turned back and said faintly, I'll go and bring her out. Luoya had always felt that even among transcended, his sanity value was extremely high. This was mainly related to his experience. Putting his previous life aside, in this life, Luoya encountered a perverted murderer of a cult at the age of 9. The paintings drawn with human flesh and blood were extremely strange, far surpassing any horror movie. After that, after experiencing the mountain of corpses and the sea of blood in the holy capital and the horrifying alien race in the sea, Luoya's will could be said to have been tempered thousands of times. Ugh! However, this did not stop him from retching not long after he came down. Yes, facing the road formed by blood mixed with mud, Luoya's will was not defeated, but his taste system couldn't stand it anymore. He began to feel nauseous physiologically. After casting 2 curses on himself to resist the bloody storm a little, Luoya walked all the way down to the depths of the cellar while recalling the plot here in the game. In the game, Recorder's Eye, Luoya remembered that this hell on earth had a great impact on Lillian. The reason was not that Lillian was too fragile, but that Lillian's body sense was very different from others. When Luoya and the others saw these disfigured and mutilated victims, at most, they couldn't accept it and couldn't bear to look directly at them. They didn't know who they were, but Lillian was different. She knew some of the victims. In the game, Lillian had nightmares for a week because of this incident. It wasn't until Paul's visit that the knot in her heart was untied. Unfortunately, the world had changed. In reality, the relationship between Paul and her was far less close than in the game. Now that Lillian was at the scene, her reaction was probably far more intense than having nightmares. Stepping on the wet and disgusting road under his feet, Luoya walked through the uninhabited test site with a heavy heart. The young man frowned and walked to the end of the cellar. He finally found Lillian in a room similar to a cell. Chapter 289. In the cellar, the black-haired girl who heard the call snapped out of her daze. She realized that Luoya had appeared beside her without her noticing. At this moment, Luoya was covered in dust. His coat was still stained with blood and dust after the battle. However, unlike his clothes, the black-haired young man had a firm and powerful expression. His golden pupils shone in the dark cellar, gentle and calm. When she met his gaze, Lillian seemed to have forgotten about the bloody hell she was in. She forgot about the indescribable pain and unhappiness she felt. An inexplicable sense of intimacy shone in her heart like a beam of light, snapping her out of her daze. However, it was also because of this that Lillian suddenly felt an unbearable sense of shame. As an elder who had always been worried about Luoya, she didn't want to show it. She had an inexplicable feeling of not wanting the young man to see her unrecognizable self. "Don't look at me. Get out." Her hoarse voice issued a strict order. This was the first time Lillian had spoken to Luoya in such a tone since they met. Her words were strong on the outside but weak on the inside, implying that she was imploring him. Unfortunately, Luoya couldn't comply. "I'm sorry, senior sister. We're of the same rank. You can't order me around. Let go. Let go of me." Looking at the girl who kept struggling to retract her arm while crying with her head lowered, Luoya's face twitched. He was filled with regret. He didn't expect that senior sister's condition would be so serious. She probably saw an illusion when she tried to touch the corpse earlier. Thinking of this, the young man steeled his resolve. He thought for a moment and reported the news to the panicking girl. Senior sister, Miss Murdy is safe. The Blood Sacrifice Church's bishop died after he was defeated by me while escaping. The black-haired young man softly reported the situation on his side. The sudden news successfully diverted part of Lillian's attention, causing the girl to stop struggling. Seeing this, Luo Ye continued. The matters outside are almost done. I'll report to the academy tomorrow morning. This incident will be considered over. Senior sister, can you not stay here any longer? Everyone outside is worried about you. Under Luo Ye's soft persuasion, Lillian's expression finally softened. However, the corpse of her friend beside her seemed to blame her silently. The young lady turned her head and was about to look again when Luo Ye stepped forward and blocked her view. Luo Ye felt like a nightmare to see someone she once knew turn into a badly mutilated corpse. The scariest part was that Lillian was also the head of the security department. This could be said to be the biggest knot in Luo Ye's heart. But after careful consideration, Luo Ye came up with a countermeasure. Luo Ye? Senior sister, don't look anymore. Don't tell me you think it's your fault. Of course, I'm the head of the security department. If I had discovered this earlier, stop joking. What does this have to do with you? Luo Ye frowned and asked angrily. The Blood Sacrifice Church has existed here for at least 10 years. How many ministers of the Ministry of Security have there been in the past 10 years? Senior sister, do you think they're all guilty? The leader of this cult, Matthew, is a teacher. He knows the movement patterns of the Ministry of Security like the back of his hand. It's impossible to discover them through normal means. Senior sister, are you able to predict the future and solve this problem? And most importantly, although the victims are our seniors, strictly speaking, they're outsiders after graduation. The Ministry of Security is the department responsible for the safety of all students. They're not under their jurisdiction at all. Moreover, none of the students in the school were harmed. Senior sister, are you going to deny the hard work of the Ministry of Security? No, of course not. Luo Ye's question made the young lady hurriedly deny it. However, the pain in her heart couldn't be easily eliminated. Luo Ye looked at Lillian and couldn't help but feel sorry for her. After a month of interaction, Lillian might have understood Luo Ye, but Luo Ye also understood her. Although Lillian had a cold personality, she wasn't emotionless. It could be said that Lillian attached great importance to friendship and familial ties, far more than anything else. This was also the reason why the Austin Empire had been able to maintain a balance of power. Her two elder brothers were unable to surpass level 3 of the source rank and had no advantage other than their age. If Lillian really didn't care about their brotherhood, it wouldn't be difficult for her to get rid of them with her innate talent and powerful backing. However, she had never thought of doing so, even though she knew that they hated her to the core. She didn't fight for it, not because she couldn't, but because she didn't want to. Lillian's gentleness was silent and difficult to capture. Luo Ye, who had experienced it during the remedial classes, couldn't be clearer. Chapter 290. The moment the bloodline resonance appeared, both Lillian and Luo Ye's minds went blank. Neither of them expected such a thing to happen, but the next moment, that feeling of perfect harmony instantly occupied their hearts. Before their subjective thoughts were reflected, the bloodline resonance was already using its own method to promote their choice. If a person's happiness and sadness were affected to a certain extent by hormones, then the bloodline's influence was an indescribable yet irresistible sense of intimacy. Although this surging resonance was only for a short moment, it completely changed Luo Ye and Lillian's understanding of each other and also solved many mysteries in Lillian's heart. So that's how it is. The purple-eyed girl widened her eyes. She finally understood why she had been acting so strange recently. No matter if it was the natural concern or the uncontrollable pity, it wasn't without reason. The power of being a blood relative had already unknowingly influenced Lillian. Although there was no resonance, every time her and Luo Ye's spell powers clashed and overlapped, subtle changes would occur. Actually, now that she thought about it, many things were already quite obvious. They were both of the same creation element and the same spell powers. With all these coincidences overlapping, the only explanation was that they weren't coincidences. However, the huge difference in her living environment made Lillian ignore all of this. And when the truth arrived, it brought her a huge surprise. If one were to trace the origins of the Ackerman family and the Akot family, it had been at least 1,000 years since they met. Lillian viewed this bloodline relationship that spanned countless years as a treasure that Shia had bestowed upon her. A bloodline family. A relationship that she couldn't betray, couldn't hate, and absolutely couldn't be severed. These words spread in Lillian's heart like a hot current. At the same time, Luo Ya's mind was in chaos. Lillian was his bloodline relative? How was this possible? Disregarding everything else, if this relationship was discovered, Lillian's situation would be, Luo Ya, we are senior sister. The black-haired boy looked at the girl who was so agitated that she couldn't speak. He was about to speak when he suddenly felt an uncontrollable spell power rapidly erupting in his body. At the same time, Luo Ya's black rose ring glowed as if it was resonating with the spell power. Not good. Senior sister, get away from me. Luo Ya. Luo Ya, who had already experienced this situation twice, instantly paled and pushed the girl away. Under Lillian's astonished gaze, the torrent of curse power erupted with an unstoppable force. Before he could speak, Luo Ya's vision turned black, and he lost consciousness. When the black-haired young man opened his eyes again, he was greeted by a starless night sky. He could hear the crackling of flames on wood, and the thick smell of blood filled his nostrils. The cold ground and the night wind made him shiver. Luo Ya's hazy brain slowly turned in the darkness, thinking about the current situation and everything that had happened before. The blood envelope incident, the dark space when he was guarding, the explosion of blood when he defeated the cultists, and the scenes of the night before he lost consciousness flashed across the young man's mind. Finally, it came to a tear-stained face that couldn't contain its joy. The moment he thought of Lillian, Luo Ya finally woke up completely. He sat up with his palms on the ground and called out, "Senior sister." His hurried voice echoed in the night, but unfortunately, there was no response. Luo Ya panted under the light of the fire and quickly realized his condition. It must be a fragment of history, but why did it have to happen at that time? Thinking of the situation at that time, Luo Ya was anxious. He quickly looked around with the help of the fire, and when he found that Lillian wasn't nearby, his mind went blank. No one? What's going on? Is it because I pushed senior sister away? No, that's impossible. After all, I pushed her away to interrupt the activation of the King's Blood ability. If I didn't succeed, the chances of senior sister not being involved, recalling the last time Xia Luo was pulled into a fragment of history even though they were sleeping in the same room, Luo Ya's heart couldn't help but sink. He held his forehead and forced himself to calm down. Right now, there were only two possibilities. The first was that senior sister didn't come in. Luo Ya really wanted to set off firecrackers to celebrate. No one knew the dangers of a fragment of history better than Luo Ya. Most of the time, it was unreasonable. For example, if he encountered Mr. Darkness without a Mother Earth like Paitila, no matter how strong he was, he would probably die. Luo Ya had just reunited with this blood relative of his, and the indescribable feelings in his chest still lingered. No matter what, he couldn't accept that Lillian's life was in danger. If possible, he was even willing to sacrifice some of his life in exchange for Lillian's safety. But he had to admit that reality wasn't affected by one's emotions. After a rational analysis, Luo Ya felt that this possibility was a little low. Chapter 291. Saint Heroes Society. Saint Envoy? On the side of the road, Luo Ya stared at the first line of the letter with the help of the firelight. His golden pupils constricted in disbelief, and he suddenly turned around to look at the pile of corpses behind him. They're from the Saint Heroes Society? The Saint Heroes Society is undoubtedly a cult, but the cultists are also cultists. So, it seems like this is a double cross? The black-haired boy blinked. He did not expect to find a group of dead enemies. The Saint Heroes Society, this name was deeply etched in Luo Ya's memory. During the Civil War of the Golden Fleet, Luo Ye had a close relationship with the director of the Saint Heroes Society, Daoj Lasai. He even chased after him and made the young level 2 source puppet master break down. Of course, because Daoj Lasai almost succeeded in killing Xia Luot, Luo Ye was still angry even if he was turned into thousands of pieces of frozen meat. After returning, Luo Ye also asked about the situation of the Nuo Ire organization. After some investigation, Miss Angel told him that the Saint Heroes Society's activities in the theocracy had been suspended for many years. This news made Luo Ye relieved, but even so, the boy was still very concerned about this sect that believed in the Mother Goddess. After all, the 6 disasters were related to the survival of the human community, and he could not afford to underestimate the enemy. He did not expect to meet them here. After reading the letter, Luo Ye first determined the current time, 612 of the Third Era, which was almost 400 years away from the era Luo Ye lived in. The location was also very clear, near the scholar's country, Leinster. This era should be the time of the Second War of the Mutants. As for Leinster, it seems that there was a turmoil, the boy muttered to himself as he recalled the background of the era. At the same time, he tried his best to think about the content of the scholar's country, but he found that there were quite few impressions. As a huge disaster that threatened the entire human world, the main theme of this era was undoubtedly the Second War of the Mutants. Most of the writers of history were used to describe this long and drawn-out war, to record the tenacious and unyielding spirit of mankind, and to write a heroic story that could be both praised and wept. Luo Ye wouldn't be able to finish talking about all these in a day. However, as for the scholar country, there really wasn't any record of it. In the end, it was still too long ago. 800 years was enough to bury a country like the Sophia dynasty in history. Leinster from 400 years ago was not even worth mentioning compared to the front line that was rolling in the blood of the aliens. Luo Ye only remembered that there was a book that said there was a turmoil caused by the cultists in the Kingdom of Scholars, and this was also confirmed by this letter. The sender of the letter was Bradley, the president of the Leinster branch of the Saint Heroes Guild. The content of the letter was very simple. It was a plea for help. Currently, there was indeed a cult riot in Leinster City, which was probably caused by the deployment of too many human elites to the front line. Unfortunately, the main character of this riot was not the Saint Heroes Society, but the Brotherhood of Redemption. The relationship between cults was probably a blind spot for many people. Laymen often thought that jackals of the same tribe would inevitably collude with each other, but in fact, this was completely wrong. Different cults had different goals. For example, the Saint Heroes Society was a cult that longed for the 6 disasters, to purify the world and lead everyone to return to Mother Goddess. Strictly speaking, its purpose was to destroy human civilization. Luo Ye didn't know the purpose of the Brotherhood of Redemption, but one thing was certain. They didn't believe in Mother Goddess, so they probably didn't like the 6 disasters. And even if the Brotherhood of Redemption was also a group of idiots who wanted to destroy the world, they would never cooperate because they did not believe in the same God. They would be considered heathens if they did not believe in the same God. Once the heathens achieved their goal, even if the result was the same, they would still lose. Therefore, although they were all evil, they would never pee in the same pot. And now, the situation in Leinster had proven this point with facts. According to the letter, the Brotherhood of Redemption had almost completely occupied Leinster with the help of a sacred relic. The defenders and the surviving residents of the city had retreated to St. Freya's College and activated the defense mechanism of the city within the city. The Brotherhood of Redemption saw this and temporarily changed their target, killing the cultists in the city who disobeyed their leadership. The Saint Heroes Society was the first to bear the brunt and suffered heavy losses. As an old cult, the Saint Heroes Society also had their own trump card, but it seemed that only the Sacred Envoy could activate it. This was also the reason why they sent an urgent letter to the Sacred Envoy. But unfortunately, the Saint Heroes Society couldn't wait for their Sacred Envoy because after confirmation, Luo Ye found that the so-called Sacred Envoy was the dead young man. There's no saving him. Goodbye. After reading the entire letter, Luo Ye had a basic understanding of the current situation in Leinster City. He was happy to see this dog-eat-dog situation, But at the same time, a choice appeared in front of him, and that was to enter the city or not. It was obvious that compared to the complicated situation in Leinster City, where all parties were fighting, the wilderness was much safer despite its hardships. Just hide in the woods for half a month, and at the very least, they could keep their lives. That's right. Luoya was actually unwilling to get involved in this mess. After all, he was not in a good state now. This time, the timing of entering the historical fragment was too bad. Unlike the previous 2 times when he was full of energy, Luoya had just defeated Matthew, who sacrificed himself. In the process, he overdrew his vitality and used the touch of frozen earth. Although the extent was very light compared to the past, the side effects were still there. After entering the city, no matter if he encountered the Saint Heroes Society or the Brotherhood of Redemption, it was basically unavoidable to fight. The only one he could rely on was the Academy, which was the weakest. To get there, he would have to pass through a large area occupied by the enemy. And most importantly, even if he arrived, Luoya, who had no identity in this era, should not be able to enter. In the war against the cult, it was common sense to never let a traitor sneak in even if there was a shortage of people. Not entering the city was undoubtedly the safest situation, but on the other hand, there were also many problems. First of all, naturally, there was the system's evaluation and harvest. Although the historical fragment was unusually dangerous, it would bring a huge leap in Luoya's strength every time. This was without a doubt. Not entering the city was equivalent to giving up this precious opportunity. On the other hand, it was the 612th year of the Second Era. At this time, the Dusk Sage Society should not have disappeared yet. The scholar should be in the academy, and there was nothing better than seeing the scholar in person to solve the mystery. Chapter 292. Leinster City was done for. This was the most intuitive thought of the Leinster City branch president and bishop of the Saint Heroes Society, Bradley Dennis, a gray-haired, middle-aged man. It had been nearly a week since the Brotherhood of Redemption started their rebellion. In this week, Bradley's mood had almost gone through a roller coaster ride, and he had not recovered from it until now. After the war with the aliens began, the elite forces of Leinster City were constantly drawn away. With the reduction of teachers, the number of students from various countries plummeted, and the Holy See's personnel were constantly transferred to the front line. The darkness in the city began to stir. Various cults had been secretly expanding their influence and fighting with each other. This situation had been going on for 10 years. During these 10 years, it was not that the upper echelons of the human race did not know about their little tricks, but they had deliberately ignored them. The reason was very simple. They no longer had the heart and power to control them. In the end, in this critical moment of human survival at the front line, the cults that used to be a big problem in the past had become a minor problem. Situations like the one in Leinster City were everywhere in the human world. Troubled times were the best seedbed for the cults to bewitch people. There was nothing more blind than the frightened masses. They were like ignorant lambs being driven around. But what Bradley did not expect was that in this unprecedentedly comfortable environment, when everyone could eat and sleep well, and when their forces were expanding, someone would actually flip the table. The Brotherhood of Redemption was an ancient organization inherited from the World Salvation Society of the Second Era. It had been rooted in the country of scholars for hundreds of years. Although it was not as strong as the Saint Heroes Society, it was still a big tree with deep roots. In the past 10 years, it had developed rapidly and had many conflicts with the Saint Heroes Society. But Bradley never thought that they would dare to start a civil war. This could be said to have broken everyone's common bottom line. The main reason why the higher-ups of the human race turned a blind eye to them was that the cultists were only messing around under the table and would not really rebel. After all, the cultists were not fools, and the mutants were not religious. If they let them in, everyone would be doomed. The Saint Heroes Society believed that the Mother Goddess would lead the civilization to the end, and that all humans would return to the embrace of the Mother Goddess. However, this end must be brought by the Mother Goddess's messengers, and not those dirty and ugly aliens. In fact, the higher-ups of the Saint Heroes Society had indeed issued an order to stop the Brotherhood of Redemption. So when the lunatics of the Brotherhood of Redemption launched an attack in Leinster City, many forces, including the Buconia Garrison Legion and the Saint Heroes Society, joined forces to encircle and suppress them. But the result was beyond everyone's expectations. The Brotherhood of Redemption won with the help of a group of monsters that they summoned using some strange curse vessel. They were black-armored soldiers and black-robed clergy. They looked like humans, but they weren't. They didn't go out to battle during the day, but once night fell, they would wander over in groups. They would let out strange whispers from their mouths. Those who heard them would have a splitting headache, while those who heard them would go mad. Under the attack of these terrible monsters, the remaining Leinster garrison had retreated to St. Freya Academy, and a small number of students in the academy and the resident deputy dean, Estrella, were waiting for reinforcements. However, Bradley was not so lucky. After losing their primary target, the Brotherhood of Redemption targeted their old enemy, the Saint Heroes Society. Now, the Saint Heroes Society had holed up near Castle Worcester in the East City District, and they were about to be completely defeated. The news secretly sent back by the undercover agent tonight made Bradley even more desperate. The Saint Heroes Society's reinforcements were intercepted on the way. The death of the saint meant that the Saint Heroes Society in Leinster City had lost their last trump card. It was unknown how long it would take for the human reinforcements to arrive from the front line. The garrison in St. Freya Academy might be able to hold on until then, but the Saint Heroes Society would definitely be wiped out before then. If the order of the High-Level Council could not be fulfilled, all of them would die. They would either be killed by the monsters in the night, or be dealt with by the council. This desperate situation made the skinny middle-aged man drown his sorrows in alcohol. After downing another bottle of century-old red wine, Bradley's face was flushed red. He walked to the window and looked at the dim streets outside the castle, as if he could see the terrible monsters crawling out of the night. Who is it? Didn't I say not to disturb me? The sudden knock on the door interrupted the gray-faced man's imagination. It also made Bradley, who came back to his senses, a little angry. He yelled impatiently at the door, but he didn't expect to hear the excited report of the believer outside the door. Lord Bishop, the saint from the council has arrived. Saint? And what bullshit saint? Bradley thought angrily. He led a large group of people to the East City Gate, which was still in their hands. Behind him, the giant scorpion puppet followed closely. When he heard the soldier say that the saint had arrived, Bradley was not happy at all. Instead, he broke out in a cold sweat. Others might not know what was going on with the saint, and might even be waiting anxiously, but he knew very well. Saint? The Brotherhood of Redemption had already killed him. Now, there was a 99% chance that he was their spy. At the torchlit city gate, Bradley saw the black-haired boy talking to the believers from a distance. Seeing this situation, the skinny middle-aged man waved his hand and ordered loudly, "He's a fake. Catch him for me." The white-robed believers behind him rushed out from both sides, and the scorpion puppet made a strange roar. The believers around Luoya turned pale with fright and hurriedly retreated. For a time, the black-haired boy was surrounded. Not good. It seems that they have some information channels, or the saint and Bishop Bradley know each other. Luoya thought so in his heart. He could not help but frown slightly. According to the situation in the letter, the saint directly under the council should not meet with the local believers. In the letter, Bradley did not seem to know the name of the saint. This was a big reason why Luoya wanted to pretend to be the saint, but the reality did not develop as he imagined. Chapter 293. At the East City Gate of Leinster, countless white-robed men surrounded the young man at the gate with torches in their hands. The night wind was howling, but the air here seemed to be frozen. Bradley's voice echoed in the night, attracting everyone's attention. Everyone was waiting for Luoya's answer, but this question was too difficult for the young man. The name of the director who sent him here. This question touched on Luoya's greatest concern, which was the interpersonal relationships of this era. This was a situation that he could hardly grasp after entering the historical fragment. It was like a sharp sword, stabbing directly at his weak spot. Under the light of the torches, the black-haired young man was silent. Bradley's mouth was curved with a mixture of a smile and killing intent. Just as he was about to give the order, Luo Ye suddenly spoke. "Bradley, where did you get the courage to ask me to say the director's name in public?" Under the gaze of the believers, the black-haired young man gritted his teeth and questioned sternly, which made the middle-aged man's momentum falter. Bradley looked at Luo Ye's angry face and was stunned. He realized that he did ask some questions, but he didn't want to change his answer in public. More importantly, if he didn't say it in public, Bradley would have to talk to Luo Ye privately, which he absolutely couldn't do. Because Bradley was from the puppet school. In the puppet school, when the puppet was activated, the body didn't have much combat power. When the puppet wasn't activated, although the combat power would increase, it was still far weaker than the same level. The other party might be here to assassinate him, so how could Bradley be stupid enough to stay with him? These are all trustworthy believers, you can say it. After thinking for a moment, Bradley said so with a flicker in his eyes. However, what he didn't know was that Luo Ye had already expected his answer. Devout believers? Hearing this, the black-haired young man's golden eyes lit up, and an angry smile appeared on his face. "Before coming here, I also thought that you would be devout believers, but after entering the city, I only felt one kind of emotion, fear." "What did you say?" Bradley asked angrily, but Roha didn't pay attention to him. He gritted his teeth and glanced sharply at the crowd. Then he asked loudly. In less than a week, 3/4 of the city of Leinster had been occupied. The orders of the council were not carried out at all. Even Prandal, who was sent as reinforcements, had died on the way. When you were running for your lives, did you ever think about the glory of the Mother Goddess? Bradley Dennis. Cowardly and timidly. Why are you still talking to me about being devout? What is devout? Hundreds of years ago, the young director Deoj Lasai returned to the embrace of God's embrace on the vast, vast sea. His soul will forever follow the great Mother Goddess, but what about you? How are you compared to him? Bishop Bradley? The black-haired young man stared at the middle-aged man in front of him with burning eyes, causing Bradley's expression to change drastically. Director Deoj Lasai, this name was no longer circulated in the Saint Heroes Society, but Bradley was absolutely familiar with it, because strictly speaking he was the early leader of the puppet school in the Saint Heroes Society. Legend had it that he reached the Source Level 2 at a young age, but in order to delay the enemy during a mission he entered the embrace of God's messenger in advance. Although Deoj Lasai's deeds were publicized, after hundreds of years, no one except the younger generation of the puppet school knew about it. For Luo Ye to mention this name, the only possibility was that he had seen the records of that time at the director's headquarters. Comparing Deoj Lasai to Bradley could be said to be a rather obscure reprimand. Deoj Lasai was already a Source Level 2 at a young age, and his position was high enough to be a director. Bradley, who was so old, had just broken through to the Source Level 2 not long ago and was only a bishop. Deoj Lasai fought tenaciously and returned to the embrace of God's messenger for faith, but Bradley was almost defeated and battered. The two were simply incomparable. Thinking of this, the middle-aged man's face turned red, but he did not dare to speak casually anymore. This was because Luo Ye's reprimand had vaguely proved his identity and made him panic. Is he really the saint's messenger? Bradley's face turned ugly and his eyes wandered. Luo Ye did not pursue the matter further. He took a deep breath as if to calm his anger, then looked at the middle-aged man calmly and said, "You asked who asked me to come here. I'll tell you. All the members of the board unanimously agreed to transfer me here from Twin Horn Port. Strictly speaking, I'm a special envoy. It seems that the letter from the board has not arrived yet, so it's normal that you don't know me." Twin Horn Port? Bradley's eyes widened when he heard the familiar name. That was the resting place of God's messenger that only the higher-ups of the Saint Heroes Society knew about. It was a pilgrimage place for the believers of Mother Goddess, and because it was also the place where Deoj Lasai died, Bradley had been there once when he was young and was one of the few bishops who knew about it. Luo Ye came from Twin Horn Port, so he was almost certain that he was a higher-up directly under the board. With this thought in mind, Deoj Lasai trusted the young man even more. Luo Ye, who noticed the bishop's reaction when he heard about Twin Horn Port, narrowed his golden pupils and continued to speak. You don't know me, but you should know this aura. This is the grace given to me by God's messenger. The black-haired young man raised his hand as if he had received God's grace. The next moment, white mist began to condense in his palm. It was the terrifying cold air from the frozen earth. It was the tip of the iceberg of the monster that once sealed the earth and destroyed civilization. The moment it was released, the believers felt uneasy, but Bradley felt as if he was struck by lightning. This was the aura of the messenger of Mother Goddess who was sleeping in the abyss of the sea. Bradley, who had been to Twin Horn Port and felt the aura of the frozen earth, was excited. At this moment he completely believed in Luo Ya's identity. At the same time, he looked at him with a warm gaze. Chapter 294. The Saint Luo Ya had become the light in the hearts of all the believers of the Mother Goddess tonight. He was the Redeemer, the grace of the Mother Goddess for her desperate children. He was also the Punisher, the thunder and lightning that judged all blasphemers of the Mother Goddess. In the eastern district of Leinster, the fearless believers began an unbelievable all-out counterattack with red eyes. The front line formed by the black-armored soldiers and black-clothed clergy was destroyed as the battle cries shook the entire city. Beside the black-haired youth, the most elite disciples of the Mother Goddess formed a personal guard, pledging their lives to protect the greatest saint. Bishop Bradley's eyes were red with bloodlust as he stood on top of the giant scorpion puppet, leading the charge. He knew that this was his last chance. The Mother Goddess is watching me. The passionate fanatics roared and rushed into the crowd to launch a suicide attack. The front line of the Brotherhood of Redemption was almost smashed to pieces. Realizing that something was wrong, the Brotherhood of Redemption hurriedly sent reinforcements, but they still could not stop the burning soldiers. Damn it! What the hell is going on? Are the lackeys of the Mother Goddess crazy? At the headquarters of the Brotherhood of Redemption, Bishop Santos listened to the report of his subordinates. He felt like he was in a dream, and he could not understand the current situation. The Saint Heroes Society was depressed during the day, and they were about to die. At night, their morale did not completely collapse. Instead, it was as if they were injected with chicken blood. How was this possible? What about our Redemption Legion? How did they break through the blockade of the Redemption Legion? I heard that the arrival of the Saint Heroes Society attracted the attention of the Mother Goddess here. Bullshit. The saint has been killed by us long ago. Where did the saint come from? Santos interrupted his subordinates angrily. After thinking for a while, he decided to see the situation himself. However, as he approached the battlefield, the gloomy middle-aged man's face began to turn ugly. Shouts of killing, full of morale, and earth-shattering shouts came almost continuously from the front. The turbulent flow of magic essence, the screams of the believers, everything told Santos the fierceness of the enemy in front. Quickly stepping on the high platform, the surprised man looked into the distance and saw a black-haired youth walking in the center of the team under the soaring flames. He was covered in moonlight, and his golden eyes were shining like candlelight. A strange spell wave was emitted from his body, and the whispers of the black soldiers and clergy were dissolved under the wave. He was surrounded by Bishop Bradley of the Saint Hero Society and a group of high-level believers in white robes. A giant scorpion-shaped puppet stood in front of him. Countless warriors were shouting the names of the Saint Apostle and Mother Goddess as they charged forward fearlessly. Damn it, how is this possible? Do they have two saints? Santos stared at the black-haired youth in the team, and his expression changed sharply. To be able to resist the blasphemous whispers of the Redemption Legion and organize such a large formation to make all the believers fearless of death, there seemed to be no other possibility except for the saint. If it was really the saint, then the Brotherhood of Redemption must greatly adjust their strategy. The strength of the Saint Heroes Society was not necessarily strong, because the selection of the saint was not measured by strength. Otherwise, it would not be so easy to kill them. In fact, the existence of the saint was more like a key. They could activate the trump card of the Saint Heroes Society. According to the instructions Santos received from above, This was the only thing that must be avoided. For this purpose, they spent a lot of effort to intercept and kill the saint, but now it seemed that the other party was well prepared. In the end, one of them still slipped in. The situation must be reported to the Lord immediately. With this thought in mind, Santos angrily stared in the direction of Luoya and left the front line amidst the Saint Heroes Society's imposing shouts. Bradley felt as if he was in a dream. 2 hours later, when the sun rose, the Saint Heroes Society stopped attacking under the orders of the saint. By this time, they had recovered all of the East City District and part of the North City District, expanding their sphere of influence by twofold in one breath, almost back to before the start of the war. This was the first and only great victory since the start of the war. It greatly encouraged the believers and saved Bradley, who was on the verge of death. Luoya also completely became the leader of the Leinster Saint Heroes Society in this battle. The black-haired youth looked at the cheering crowd in silence. Now that things had developed to this point, the infiltration mission was basically a complete success. Now, who would dare to doubt Luoya? He did not need to do anything, as the believers would help him turn the other party into ashes. Of course, in addition to completely controlling the Saint Heroes Society, Luoya also had a second consideration, which was to make a big move and attract everyone's attention. Whether it was the legions and students in St. Freya's Academy or Lillian who might be in the city, Luoya needed them to discover him before he could talk about other things. Especially the latter, finding his senior was now his #1 goal. Of course, in order to make a big move, the Saint Heroes Society had to pay a high price. Luoya's crown source substance only provided resistance against the whispers that made people go crazy. It did not affect the combat power of the black-armored soldiers and black-clothed clergy. The Saint Heroes Society actually won the battle with fewer people tonight. It was all because of their incredible morale and fearless fighting style that they could achieve such a great victory. But Luoya did not feel bad about it at all. Death, they could all die. After all, it was a cult after a cult, so it was not wrong for them to die. Moreover, they were indeed not afraid of death. The devout believers have defended the glory, and their souls have returned to Mother Goddess. Chapter 295. Lillian knew that she wasn't normal right now. For the first time since she was born, the young girl's mind was in a mess even though her body was perfectly fine. All sorts of messy information converged, and intense emotions cut her nerves like sharp knives. Luoya had expected that Lillian's emotions would be unstable. After all, the young man believed that Lillian's friends who had died tragically in the cellar had a huge impact on her and shook her spirit. Suddenly entering a part of history made it even more difficult for her to get used to it. However, what he didn't know was that none of this was important to the current Lillian. Right now, there was only one thing in Lillian's mind, and it was a fact that she couldn't accept. Her younger brother had gone missing. If Lillian recalled correctly, before they parted, Luoya had indeed told her that he had killed the evil cult's bishop, Matthew, and that he wasn't in a good condition. In this dangerous world filled with monsters, in a city that was both familiar and unfamiliar, what did it mean to be in a bad condition? Lillian didn't dare to think about it, because those thoughts would probably drive her insane. It's all my fault. If I didn't touch him, the black-haired young girl muttered to herself. The uncontrollable worry and regret in her heart made Lillian choke up. When Luoya entered the academy, Lillian had received an order from the Austin Empire's emperor, Lucas, that she wasn't to come into contact with the Akkad family. Strictly speaking, Lillian could have avoided this situation completely. Although Luoya had caught her, the young man was wearing gloves, and Lillian was the one who had caused the situation to develop to such a state. In the end, it was because Lillian had let down her guard after being together for such a long time. Especially when she heard Luoya say, "I need you," Lillian felt as if a certain part of her body had been mended, and she couldn't help but want to get close to him. However, she didn't expect that her unbridled desire would drag her newly recognized younger brother into such a dangerous situation. The irritating whispers entered her ears again. The black-haired young girl's purple eyes turned, and she looked coldly at the countless monsters hiding in the building. So noisy, The girl who had her thoughts interrupted waved her hand. In the next moment, a dense rain of arrows was shot towards the enemy. The black-armored soldiers and black-robed clergy fell in droves under the attack. Amidst the sound of the horn, the armored soldiers raised their swords and charged forward. They began to annihilate the enemy one by one. The sound of clashing swords and shattering armor continued. The smell of blood also spread rapidly. Lillian looked at these strange enemies and her heart was filled with concern for Luoya. According to her understanding from last night, the annoying murmurs of these monsters would cause headaches or even madness for ordinary people. However, the effects on Lillian were much weaker. Although Lillian would feel uncomfortable every time she heard the murmurs, her bloodline would react and counteract the terrifying effects as if it was protecting her. She was doing well for the time being, but what about Luoya? Although they were of the same bloodline, Luoya was only level 4 of the source level. His body was not in good condition. Could he resist these monsters? The black-haired young girl beside the overturned holy statue clenched her trembling hands. She felt that if she continued to think like this, her mind would not be able to hold on. Sensing this, the young girl repeatedly took deep breaths. Her brain began to think of a way to find Luoya. After a month of interaction and the blood envelope incident, Lillian had a good understanding of Luoya. Therefore, she could more or less predict his behavior. As a meticulous person, Luoya would not rashly go to the academy now. Neither he nor Lillian could enter under such circumstances. Even if they did, the two of them would definitely be detained and supervised. Losing his freedom in such an inexplicable environment was undoubtedly a bad move. Luoya would not choose that. Therefore, the only choice left was the outer city. This area was currently the most chaotic place in Leinster. According to the information obtained from the cultists last night, 2 cultists were fighting on a large scale. These monsters were the trump cards of one of the cultists. Would Luoya side with the cultists? How could that be? Her beloved brother was kind and righteous, law-abiding. How could he be involved with cultists? Lillian shook her head as she thought. She did not know that Luoya had become the leader of a cult in a single night. Her analysis suggested that Luoya must be defending himself against the monsters with the advantage of his bloodline. Of course, all of this was built on the basis that Luoya wanted to find her sister and reunite with her. Otherwise, the forest outside the city would be the least dangerous choice. At the thought of this, the girl became timid. There was no doubt that the two of them were related by blood. However, it was still unknown whether Luoya would acknowledge her. Considering that Luoya was a noble of the theocracy and his relationship with Rochet, the disadvantages of acknowledging her as his sister would outweigh the advantages. If he did not want her when the time came, just imagining the situation made Lillian's purple eyes sour. She was worried about her personal gains and losses. The horn sounded again. Another wave of soldiers charged at the black-armored monsters. The girl who was awakened by the sound hurriedly shook her head. She recalled the black-haired youth's expression when they parted and encouraged herself. No. If it's Luoya, he won't. Lillian stroked her chest and gradually calmed down. The light of rationality returned to her purple eyes. After a moment, she had decided on how to reunite. Chapter 296. Luoya was in a terrible state. It had been less than 6 hours since he entered the historical fragment. From the time he impersonated the saint and confronted Bradley, to the time he led the fanatics of the Saint Heroes Society to the point where he was victorious until dawn, everything seemed to be going smoothly. However, every step he took was filled with trepidation. Most importantly, he had consumed too much energy. Luoya was able to create miracles because the Black Rose Ring had brought Luoya to meet these strange monsters in the academy at night. In the past month, in order to unlock the authority, Luoya had used the crown source substance to perform various experiments. One of them was to suppress the black-armored soldiers within a certain range. But it had to be said that Luoya's research in the academy yielded little results. The only use of the source substance to release waves to suppress the enemies within a certain range was to make Luoya's head feel better and less uncomfortable. But in this battlefield, this technique was reborn. Because Luo Ye had teammates, and he didn't need to look at the battle damage ratio. Luo Ye was very sure that the skill wasn't used in vain. But correspondingly, he had consumed a lot of energy and had to rest and recover as soon as possible. On the other hand, he also needed to gather more information. The black-haired young man frowned after glancing at the system evaluation. He wasn't too satisfied with the result. The increase of 37 points in one night seemed huge, but Luo Ye knew the characteristics of the system's evaluation. The lower the score, the easier it was to increase it. The higher the score, the harder it was to increase it. If this was the case, the 30 points might not even be as good as the 5 points when the score was high. Luo Ye had two guesses about this situation. The first was that although Luo Ye had killed a bunch of cultists from both sides, they were all cannon fodder and didn't have any outstanding leaders, so his score wasn't that high. The other reason was that Luo Ye's objective was wrong. After all, he wasn't here to help the Holy Heroes Guild turn the tables. The medium of this historical fragment was the Ring of the Black Rose, which came from scholar Estrid. Anyone with a normal brain would seek refuge with her. In fact, if it weren't for Lillian, Luo Ye would have thought of a way to do so. Luo Ye only attacked the enemy indirectly and did not provide any direct help to the allies. This was probably the reason for his low score. However, Luo Ye didn't really care about this. What was the point of having a high score? Could it be exchanged for a living person? The most important thing was to find his senior. Everything else was nonsense. As for the means, Luo Ye already had a plan. In the solemn hall, the believers who had just experienced a battle were gathered here. Many of them were covered in dust and some were even injured, but their spirits were abnormally high. This was because in front of them, a black-haired young man was looking at them with his golden eyes, while Bishop Bradley stood respectfully to the side. Everyone in last night's battle, we defended the glory of Mother Goddess and proved our piety with our actions. The filthy blasphemers were driven back by us, and the momentum of the Brotherhood of Redemption has been greatly reduced. Now in this city, the homeless imitators must have heard of our bravery, and they must be eagerly inquiring about us. Therefore we must make a sound. Let my name spread throughout Leinster, let all enemies know of the arrival of Mother Goddess. The solemn-looking young man ordered, and the excited believers immediately responded. Luo Ye looked at the believers who were madly repeating his name. He estimated that in less than 3 days, everyone in Leinster would know of him. The black-haired young man nodded with satisfaction and looked at the morning sun outside the window, silently praying for the safety of the girl. Castle Worcester in the Eastern City District welcomed its new owner today. After dawn, the black-haired young man was escorted by a large group of people to Castle Worcester, the headquarters of the Leinster St. Heroes Guild. The owners of the large buildings in the city, the Worcester family, had died in the turmoil, and now the largest family property was temporarily requisitioned. After stepping on the red carpet that represented victory into the castle, the loyal believers immediately strengthened the security here, with sentries every 5 steps and sentries every 10 steps. When Bishop Bradley returned, he applied to Luo Ye to retrieve the sacred relic, and the black-haired young man quietly approved after some consideration. On the one hand, Luo Ye's identity as a saint envoy was destined to personally control the so-called sacred relic of the Saint Heroes Guild. On the other hand, Bishop Bradley's departure gave him time to fully understand the current situation. In fact, since entering the historical fragment until now, Luo Ye's feelings were quite chaotic. In the past, the forces in the 2 historical fragments would choose one of the 2, and one side would have the ancestors, so there was no need to think at all. The purpose of both sides was also very clear, so he just had to follow and be done with it. But this time was different. Not only had the forces become 3, but Luo Ye could not even figure out what each of them was doing. On the surface, it seemed that the Brotherhood of Redemption was attacking the city, the Evening Sage was defending the city, and the Saint Heroes Guild was being beaten, but in fact, all 3 sides had a strange feeling, which made Luo Ye feel uneasy. First of all, the Brotherhood of Redemption. At such a critical juncture in the war with the aliens, this group of people suddenly rebelled. Was it really just because they were sick? And what was the meaning of this rebellion? What did they want to do? In history, all rebellions had to overthrow the old forces, so they had to have a good reason. But the Brotherhood of Redemption actually released so many black monsters, and if it were not for the other two sides restraining them, they would have directly massacred the city. Who would follow such lunatics? How could this rebellion succeed? Or was it that the Brotherhood of Redemption was a rebel volunteer, and he rebelled for the sake of rebelling? Secondly, the garrison troops and students in St. Freya Academy basically belonged to the Evening Sage Guild. This group of people also had problems, and the biggest problem was last night. Last night, Luoya led the fanatics to attack the Brotherhood of Redemption and had the upper hand the whole time. The momentum was unprecedentedly great, and almost all the monsters in the North City District were attracted. This situation was simply a heaven-sent opportunity in military terms. As long as St. Freya Academy opened the city and sent troops to attack from the front and back, the Brotherhood of Redemption would definitely be beaten to a pulp last night. At that time, the Saint Heroes Guild and the Brotherhood of Redemption would each occupy half of the periphery of Leinster, and the situation would obviously be much better. But in the face of this heaven-sent opportunity, they were actually indifferent. Was it purely because of poor command and passive defense, or was there a reason why the scholars and guardians could not come out? The last one was the Saint Heroes Guild, who played the role of the younger brother in this war. In fact, they were indeed the younger brother, but since they were the younger brother, why were they still stubbornly holding on? Chapter 297. Luoya didn't know how long it had been since he last had this feeling. It was the hazy feeling of being guided in his sleep, like a pilgrim who was about to meet his God. Under this guidance, his mind was numb as if it was protected, and his body's reactions seemed to be blocked. Exhaustion was like an iceberg in the sea. Most of it was hidden under the surface of the water, leaving only an insignificant part in Luoya's heart. If there was one thing that could cause him to be sluggish and slightly surprised, it would be the unprecedented environment. The street. It wasn't the blood-red plains of the Gulendair, nor was it the valley surrounded by Pei Tila's body. Instead, it was a wholly white, spacious and bright imperial road that seemed to welcome a victorious king. It was purely man-made. This was completely different from the pilgrimage of the past, which made Luoya's remaining thoughts jump, but this didn't affect the guidance. The black-haired boy walked on the road that seemed to emit a faint white light under the sun, and continued to move towards the towering and huge palace. Fluttering flags, towering towers, and scarlet red carpets with golden embroidery displayed nobility and glory. Layers upon layers of majestic city gates opened, and the resplendent interior of the magnificent buildings displayed the prosperity of this magnificent place. Luoya never thought that the existence he met this time would actually live in a place like the Holy Kingdom in people's fantasies. After all, the environment of the ancient gods who followed him didn't show him any traces of ancient civilization. In a state of numbness, Luoya passed through a long corridor and arrived in front of a door. The black-haired boy walked to the door and stopped for the first time. His brain reflexively knew where this place was. This was the core of the whole building, and also the place where the gods lived. In the empty palace, no one opened the door for him, but with a rumbling sound, the gorgeous and heavy door opened naturally. Inside the palace, a ray of light leaked out from the gap between Luoya's eyebrows and gradually expanded to both sides. At the same time, solemn and classical music began to sound. The top of the hall suddenly lit up, and golden powder-like powder fell down. It floated to the ground and turned into flowers with a bang. In the middle of the golden rain and the sea of flowers, a white-haired woman sat on the throne on the high platform as if she was sleeping. She was about 17 or 18 years old. Her delicate skin was like white jade, but it didn't lose its color. Her vermilion lips were small and cute without makeup. Her slender body was exquisite in the tight dress, and her long eyelashes cast beautiful arc-shaped shadows on her eyelids. Perhaps she was awakened by the music, or perhaps she sensed someone's arrival, but the woman's eyelids trembled slightly. After a moment, she slowly opened. When her bright red pupils appeared to be exposed, to be seen, Luoya suddenly woke up. The black-haired boy's body trembled, and he carefully looked up at the high platform. The white-haired woman seemed to be in a trance, but when her red eyes met Luo Ya's gaze, her face revealed a familiar and warm smile, which surprised Luo Ya. Finally, we meet. My name is Altacia. I am the Queen of Witches. The white-haired woman said and stretched out her finger, as if she was a teacher explaining the key points of knowledge. However, Luo Ya's eyes widened when he heard this sentence. Witches, this term was no joke in Xia. It was not a derogatory term used by those women who were burned to death on groundless charges in Luo Ya's previous life. It was a group of witches that did exist. The number of witches was too small, and they did not like to live in groups, so they could not be called a race. However, in ancient times, they had a considerable status, but compared to other powerful races, they were not favored by humans. In various existing myths, their images were basically old witches who looked like both humans and ghosts, or they did not even look human. They were regarded as the incarnation of disaster, an existence that humans could not understand. This kind of group should not have a king to speak of, and the first thing they did was to introduce themselves. When did the gods become so easy to talk to? Is that what you think? Suddenly, the boy's golden pupils shrank. Altacia saw this and smiled proudly. Then, she looked at Luo Ya and stretched out her fingers to twirl her hair in confusion. That's too much. What's wrong with introducing yourself? You're obviously a special existence, so it's not good to look at others with prejudice. No, it's okay. You don't have to explain or apologize. I'm not so narrow-minded. Also, since it's Lord Hero, I forgive you. Before Luo Ya could finish his explanation, Altacia snapped her fingers and smiled. Her scarlet eyes looked at Luo Ya, and the corners of her mouth curled up cutely. In contrast, Luo Ya was filled with confusion. Lord Hero? That's right. The Lord Hero who freed Altacia from eternal death. Chapter 298. Soon it's time. Above the sea of flowers, the white-haired woman said with a hint of sadness and reluctance. Luo Ya didn't reply and only responded with silence. However, for our first meeting, it's already quite long. We even went on a date and had a wonderful time together. Why do you want to go on a date with me? For something like a date, it can't be just because I can bring you out of death, right? Is a witch the kind of person who would seek to repay a favor before doing it? Under Altacia's astonished gaze, the black-haired young man tilted his head and looked at the witch. His golden eyes were filled with rationality and calmness. The delicate fragrance of flowers filled his nose. Altacia's skin and white hair seemed to glow under the contrast of her dark-colored dress. The two of them looked at each other for a long time. After a long time, the witch curled her lips and narrowed her scarlet eyes. Of course not. How can there be such a person among the witches? Altacia stood up, and the delicate and cute expression on her face faded slightly. Facing Luo Ya's question, for the first time, she revealed a joyful smile like a witch with hidden meaning. The reason for going on a date with you is very simple. Because you are the only existence who is qualified to walk side by side with me. Hearing the unexpected answer, Luo Ya's pupils contracted slightly. Altacia smiled, and then suddenly changed the topic. Right, there's one more thing that I've always wanted someone to try. Haha, what do you think it is? Altacia revealed a mischievous smile. Without waiting for Luo Ya's reply, she reached out and snapped her fingers. The next moment, the young man's vision changed, and he appeared on the throne in the middle of the sea of flowers. How is it? The view here is very wide, right? The sudden change of position made Luo Ya widen his eyes. Altacia's voice immediately entered his ears. The young man tilted his head and saw the witch standing beside the throne with a smile. I'm watching everything from here, so I've always wanted others to experience this feeling. However, I can't easily give away something that I've used. But since it's you, it's fine. How is it? Do you like it? Luo Ya didn't know how to answer for a moment as he looked at the witch who was smiling sweetly and looking expectantly at him. Seeing this, Altacia raised her finger and exclaimed, as if she had thought of something. "Ah, right, no one is allowed to stand next to the throne. I made a mistake." The white-haired girl shyly stroked her cheeks and disappeared in the next moment. When she reappeared, she was already below the high platform. "If it's my position, it should be here." Looking around with a face full of novelty, Altacia turned her head to look at Luoya, curled her lips, and lifted her skirt to salute. When the Witch Queen obediently lowered her head, a strange feeling began to grow in Luoya's heart. It was a feeling of superiority, power, possessiveness, and control. It was a feeling of omnipotence and wanting to control everything. As expected, there are still people below. How about it? If you look from there, the people below look very small, right? That's right. Luoya, whose golden eyes lit up slightly, hesitated for a moment before nodding slightly. Altacia blinked her eyes as she saw this, and her smile became even brighter. "Does Lord Hero want to be king? What? I'm already sick of that place, but Lord Hero hasn't sat on it yet, right? No, I don't have such intentions." Chapter 299. In the room, Luoya's body stiffened as he held the box in his hand. A series of system notifications popped up in his mind. Ding! Detected mutated crown stone. Preparing to reconstruct bloodline. The system notification and the contents revealed allowed Luoya to instantly understand what was in his hand. It was the crown stone. Luoya was so excited that his hands trembled slightly. He was not in a good state. The Gulandair and Pei Tila could not be contacted. Lillian was missing, and it was hard to tell whether Altacia was good or evil. Luoya really needed power, and what the crown stone represented was self-explanatory. So far, apart from the help of the ancient gods, Luoya's greatest combat power was the frozen earth touch skill brought by the crown stone. It could be said that this was his trump card to overcome all the difficulties. Thinking of this, the teenager carefully opened the box. The dense spell seals immediately came into view. The internal structure of the box was divided into 2 layers. The first layer was the body of the box, and the lock were engraved with strange words. The second layer was a transparent gem. In the middle of the crystal-clear gem, a cloud of air the size of a fingernail was slowly rolling. Its shape was like a vague human figure. The moment he saw the strange dust-colored cloud of chaotic air, a name popped up in Luoya's mind. It was one of the 6 disasters of the mother goddess mentioned by Isha Bela. It was also a terrifying existence in the legends that destroyed many long-lived races, including the Ents. The Wind Summoner. This was the name given to it by the ancient Ents. Cade once mentioned it to Luoya. Legend said that it could only be seen in the hazy moments before death. It was a blurry figure that covered the sky and earth in the sandstorm. It could not be understood, could not be communicated, and always looked down on the world with a faceless face. This was the sacred artifact? Luoya stared at the wind summoner in his hand that was still in the form. He finally understood why the Brotherhood of Redemption was afraid. He also sighed at the madness of the Saint Heroes Society's higher-ups. Fortunately, Santos and the others had killed the saint. Otherwise, the whole of Leinster would have been in grave danger in front of the wind summoners, and would have been wiped off the map. As expected, a cult was a cult. They might have the same goal as normal people for a while, but their different views would only lead to a greater tragedy in the end. Holding the box containing the egg in his hand, Luoya pondered for a moment and didn't choose to absorb it immediately. Right now, he still needed this thing to deter the other party and balance the situation. Moreover, when he recalled the last time he absorbed the egg of the frozen earth creator, Luoya felt a little guilty. But at the same time, he also made a discovery. The Wind Summoner's egg was a sparkling gem, and it seemed to be an imitation of the Serophia's gem curse. The Frozen Earth Maker's egg was a golden soul seal. Both of the Highland Elves' specialties were methods to restrict the 6 disasters. Was this a coincidence? After pondering for a long time, Luoya shook his head and didn't delve into it. He then signaled Bradley to write a letter to agree to a meeting at noon the next day. After a night of chaotic battle, the Saint Heroes Society's believers were exhausted and needed rest. Moreover, noon was the time when the black-armored monsters were least active, so such an arrangement should be just right. After finalizing the details of the ceasefire negotiations, the black-haired young man asked about the contact with Saint Freya's academy. Luo Ye didn't come here to be a cult leader. He didn't have the noble character of a comrade who established a country to hide his identity to complete his mission. Being able to leave this den of thieves and enter the academy was something Luo Ye wished for, and the reply he received was indeed satisfactory. According to Bradley, when the garrison retreated into the academy, some of the wounded fell behind. In order to avoid the monsters, they fled to the Saint Heroes Society's territory. At that time, the Saint Heroes Society was in a difficult situation and naturally didn't have time to care about them. However, the situation was different now, and they could be used as messengers. After receiving the news, Luo Ye's eyes lit up, and he immediately went to meet the remaining soldiers. When the black-haired young man entered, the wounded soldiers were still very alert. However, to their surprise, Luo Ye didn't make any sarcastic remarks, nor did he take them hostage. Instead, he let them all go. In the face of a common threat, different species can work together, let alone us humans. Letting all of you leave is my sincerity. Give this to General Antonio and tell him that I have something important to discuss with him. After handing one of the symbols of the Saint Heroes Society, Cade's steel amber, to the leader of the wounded soldiers, Luo Ye let them go. Until the end, the young man didn't reveal the news of the current dean, Pris. The main reason for hiding this matter was that Luo Ye's current identity couldn't be revealed. The difference in status between the two was too big. When the cult leader said not to trust his own respected dean, not to mention General Antonio, even Luo Ye himself felt that it was nonsense. If the wounded soldiers heard it, they might think that he was trying to shake the morale of the army and directly refuse to pass on the message. In that case, wouldn't Luo Ye's efforts be in vain? After thinking about it, Luo Ye realized that it was useless to say anything. He simply didn't want to look for trouble. After letting the wounded soldiers go, the young man rested in peace to recover his condition and prepared for the next day's peace talks. Throughout the night, the situation at the Saint Heroes Society's front line was relatively calm for the first time since the automatic chaos. Although there were sporadic monster attacks throughout the night, they were all killed by the believers' curses and didn't lose any territory. Regarding this, Luo Ye's behavior was very strange. Although it was possible for the two armies to cease fire in advance before the war negotiations, now both sides were not disciplined armies, but fierce cultists. The wording in Santos's letter was extremely strong. Normally, they should be attacking with all their strength tonight to regain the momentum they lost yesterday and fight for chips for today's negotiations. Why was there no movement at all? The strange Luo Ye worried that there was a trap and that he had taken advantage of the Saint Heroes Society's network. As a result, he learned from the undercover that the Brotherhood of Redemption seemed to have a fire in their backyard. Last night, they sent a large number of troops to the South City District. The situation seemed to be so serious that the higher-ups ordered a lockdown on the news, so he didn't know the specific situation. You're tuning in to the Passion Page's YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.